The revolver felt heavier than it should. Thomas Caldwell had held the same Smith & Wesson Model 66 every morning for 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days. Same weight, same cold steel against his temple. Same question echoing in the pre-dawn darkness of his bedroom. Today, his finger rested on the trigger. 3 pounds of pressure. That was all it took. 3 pounds between existing and not existing. Between the pain continuing and the pain finally, mercifully stopping. The sun had not yet risen over the West Texas scrubland. Through the window of his bedroom, Thomas could see the outline of his barn, a black rectangle against the slightly less black sky. Somewhere out there, his 3 horses were sleeping. They would need feeding in an hour. The fence on the north pasture still had that broken post from last month's windstorm. His truck needed an oil change. Small things, meaningless things. Thomas lowered the gun. Not today. He placed the revolver back in the nightstand drawer, on top of the note he had written 5 years ago. The paper had yellowed, the ink had faded, but the words remained. To whoever finds me, I'm sorry I waited too long. Tell Sarah I loved her. He had never signed it, never dated it. It existed in a kind of eternal present tense, waiting for the morning when his finger would finally apply those 3 pounds of pressure. Thomas swung his legs out of bed. His knees cracked. His lower back sent up its usual complaint, a sharp spike of pain that radiated down his left leg. 62 years old. His body kept a detailed inventory of every mistake, every mile humped through jungle terrain, every night sleeping on frozen ground, every wound that had healed wrong. He walked to the bathroom without turning on lights. He knew the path. 23 steps. Avoid the loose floorboard on step 7. The bathroom mirror reflected a ghost in the darkness. Thomas did not look at it. He had stopped looking at mirrors 2 years ago, right around the time he started holding guns to his head. The medicine cabinet held his morning ritual. 6 orange prescription bottles arranged in order of importance. Blood pressure, cholesterol, acid reflux, arthritis, anxiety, sleep. He shook out pills with the practiced efficiency of a man who had been medicated for a very long time. 7 pills total. He swallowed them dry, chasing them with tap water drunk from cupped hands. The taste of West Texas water. Alkaline, slightly metallic, carrying the memory of limestone aquifers in ancient seas. He had tasted this water as a boy, running wild on his grandfather's ranch. The same land he now owned, the same land he would die on, eventually, one way or another. The coffee maker gurgled to life. Thomas had said it the night before, just as he did every night. Discipline, routine, the things that kept a man moving forward when there was no reason to move forward. While the coffee brewed, Thomas walked to the kitchen window. The sky was lightening now, shifting from black to deep blue. Stars faded. The landscape emerged from darkness like a photograph developing. Mesquite trees, prickly pear cactus, the endless rolling hills of Edwards Plateau, stretching away toward a horizon he could no longer see clearly. His right eye was going. Macular degeneration, the VA doctor had said. The center of his vision was beginning to blur, to develop dark spots. Give it 5 years, maybe 10, and he would be legally blind. Just one more thing his body had decided to take from him. Thomas poured coffee into a chipped mug. The mug had belonged to his wife. Mary had bought it at a gas station in Fredericksburg 15 years ago, on a day trip they had taken to the LBJ Ranch. The mug showed the Texas state flag and the words, "Don't mess with Texas," in faded red letters. Mary had been dead for 5 years. Thomas added whiskey to the coffee. Not much, just enough to take the edge off, just enough to make the morning bearable. He told himself it was medicinal. He told himself a lot of things. The kitchen clock read 5:42. Sunrise in 18 minutes. Another day beginning, whether he wanted it to or not. Thomas carried his coffee to the porch. The wooden steps creaked under his weight. He had gained 40 pounds since retiring from active duty. 40 pounds of the wrong kind of weight, settling around his middle, making every physical task harder than it needed to be. He sat in the rocking chair that had been his grandfather's. Robert Caldwell had sat in this chair, on this porch, and watched the same sunrise for 40 years after coming home from Korea. Thomas's father had refinished the chair in 1985, replacing the worn seat with fresh cedar. Thomas had inherited it in 2003, along with the ranch, the debts, and the ghosts. 3 generations of Caldwell men sitting in the same chair, watching the same sun rise over the same land. Legacy, continuity, the things his father had cared about, the things Thomas had failed to pass on. His daughter Sarah had not spoken to him in 5 years. The thought arrived as it did every morning, sharp and sudden, a knife between the ribs. 5 years since Mary's funeral. 5 years since Sarah had looked at him across the grave and said, "Don't ever contact me again." He had honored that request. It was the least he could do, the very least, after everything else he had failed to do. Thomas sipped his coffee and whiskey and watched the sun rise. The sky turned pink, then orange, then the hard, bright blue of a West Texas morning. The temperature was already 70 degrees. By noon, it would hit 105. September in Texas. Summer refusing to let go. His phone rang. The sound was so unexpected that Thomas actually flinched, spilling coffee on his jeans. His phone never rang. The only calls he received were robocalls about his car's extended warranty and Medicare scams. He had not had a real conversation on the phone in 6 months. The phone sat on the porch railing, vibrating against the wood. The screen showed an unknown number. Area code 915, El Paso. Thomas considered not answering, but the phone kept ringing, insistent, and some old instinct made him pick it up. "Hello." His voice sounded rough. He had not spoken to another human being in 4 days. "Mr. Caldwell." The voice on the other end was male, professional, carefully neutral. "This is Agent Chen with the FBI. I need to speak with you about your daughter." The world stopped. Thomas stood up so fast the rocking chair slammed backward into the porch wall. Coffee sloshed onto the floorboards. "What happened?" "Not a question, a demand." "There's been an incident." Agent Chen's voice remained calm, but Thomas could hear the tension underneath. "Sarah was on patrol near Presidio yesterday afternoon. Her unit encountered what they believed to be drug smugglers crossing the border. There was an engagement." "Is she alive?" "Yes," Agent Chen paused. "But she's been taken. We have reason to believe she's being held in Mexico." Thomas's free hand gripped the porch railing. The wood was warm from the rising sun. Real. Solid. The only solid thing in a world that had just tilted sideways. By who? "We don't know yet. We received a video file approximately 2 hours ago. I think you need to see it." "Send it." "Mr. Caldwell, I think it would be better if you came to our field office in El Paso. We can brief you properly, answer your questions." "Send the goddamn video." Silence on the other end. "Then sending it now. You should receive it in a few seconds." Thomas heard the chime of an incoming message. His hands were shaking as he opened it. The shaking was not from fear. It was physical. A tremor in his fingers that had started 6 months ago and gotten progressively worse. The VA doctor said it was essential tremor, a nervous system disorder common in aging men. Treatable but not curable. Just one more thing his body had decided to take from him. The video file loaded. Thomas pressed play. The screen showed a concrete room, cinder block walls painted white, a bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. In the center of the frame, a cage made of chain link fence and steel poles. Inside the cage, Sarah. Thomas had not seen his daughter in 5 years. She looked older, thinner. Her dark hair, which she had always worn long, was cut short now, pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore the dark green uniform of U.S. Border Patrol. The uniform was torn, blood stained the shoulder. Her face was swollen on the left side, the eye nearly closed. She was alive. That was all that mattered. She was alive. The camera angle shifted. A man walked into frame. He was tall, gaunt, moving with the careful economy of someone in significant pain. His hair was white. His face was deeply lined, weathered by decades of sun and violence. He wore civilian clothes, khaki pants, a white button-down shirt. On his right hand, a ring. Thomas recognized the ring before he recognized the face. A Marine Corps ring, class of 1985. The same class as Thomas. The same ring worn by First Lieutenant Jack Hartley. "Hello, Ghost." The man's voice was exactly as Thomas remembered it. Rough, slightly nasal, carrying the flat vowels of West Texas. 50 years had not changed it. "Been a long time." Hartley moved closer to the camera. His face filled the screen. The years had not been kind to him. He looked sick. The skin stretched tight over his skull. His eyes were sunken, yellow at the edges. "I expect you're surprised to see me. Most people think I'm dead. Been living under that assumption for about 15 years now. Turns out it's quite liberating being dead. You can do all sorts of things when the world isn't watching. Hartley stepped back. The camera showed Sarah again. She was watching him with the kind of focused intensity that comes from long practice at assessing threats. I've got something that belongs to you. Well, not belongs exactly. She's her own person, but she's your blood, your daughter. Sarah Elizabeth Caldwell, age 29, Border Patrol agent stationed at Presidio Sector, kidnapped approximately 18 hours ago during a routine patrol. Sarah's eyes found the camera. Thomas saw recognition there, a flash of something that might have been hope or fear or both. Here's the situation, Ghost. You and I have unfinished business. Firebase Rachel, 1983. You remember that day? Thomas remembered. God help him, he remembered. You ruined my life that day. Got me court-martialed, dishonorably discharged, took away everything I'd worked for. Spent the next 40 years wondering what my life would have been like if Corporal Thomas Caldwell had just followed orders and kept his mouth shut. Hartley pulled a chair over and sat down, facing the camera. He moved like a man whose bones hurt. Now I've got cancer, pancreatic, stage 4. Doctors give me 6 months, maybe less. So I figure, why not settle accounts? Why not finish what we started 40 years ago? He leaned forward. Here's the deal. You've got 48 hours. I'm going to send you coordinates. You come alone. No FBI, no Border Patrol, no backup of any kind. Just you. You try to bring help, I kill her. You don't show up, I kill her. You understand? Hartley stood up and walked to Sarah's cage. 48 hours from now, you and me are going to have ourselves a little contest. A duel, if you want to be fancy about it. 2,100 meters. That's your record distance, isn't it? The shot that made you famous. The shot that got you written up in all the training manuals. He gripped the chain link fence. We're going to see if you can still make it. You hit me, she goes free. You miss, or I hit you first, she dies. Simple as that. Prove you're still the legend, old man. Prove the ghost is still worth a damn. Hartley looked directly into the camera. I know you, Thomas. I know you're sitting in that ranch house right now, probably drunk before breakfast. Probably been thinking about eating your gun for the last 5 years. I know you're broken. I know you failed your wife, failed your daughter, failed at everything that mattered. He smiled. This is your chance to do one thing right. One last shot. Literally. The video ended. Thomas stood on his porch, holding his phone, watching the sun climb higher into a sky that was too blue, too bright, too absolutely indifferent to human suffering. Sarah, his daughter, the child he had held in the hospital 29 years ago, so small and perfect and terrifying in her absolute vulnerability. The girl who had learned to ride horses on this ranch, who had sat in his lap while he read her stories, who had cried on his shoulder when her first boyfriend broke her heart. The woman who had looked at him across her mother's grave and told him she never wanted to see him again. Hartley was right about most of it. Thomas was broken. He had failed Mary. He had failed Sarah. He had failed at everything that mattered. But Hartley was wrong about one thing. Thomas walked back into the house. His movements were deliberate now, purpose replacing the aimless drift of his morning routine. He went to his bedroom. The closet door stuck, swollen from humidity. Inside, pushed to the back behind winter coats he never wore, was a long black case. Thomas pulled it out and laid it on the bed. The case was dusty. He had not opened it in 8 years. Not since the week after Mary's funeral, when he had taken his rifles to the range, fired exactly 3 shots, and realized he could not see the target clearly enough to hit it. The latches clicked open. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay his grandfather's rifle, Remington 700, .30 caliber. Custom built in 1967 by Robert Caldwell himself, hand-fitted and tuned to tolerances most gunsmiths said were impossible. The stock was walnut, dark with age and oil from 3 generations of hands. The barrel was stainless steel, free-floated, capable of putting 5 shots into a group you could cover with a quarter at 500 yards. Or at least it used to be capable of that. Thomas had no idea if it still shot true. He had no idea if he could still shoot true. His hands shook as he lifted the rifle out of the case. 8 years. 8 years since he had held this weapon. 8 years since he had been anything other than a broken old man waiting to die. Thomas carried the rifle to the kitchen. He set it on the table, still wrapped in oilcloth. Then he picked up his phone and called the number Agent Shen had used. The FBI agent answered on the second ring. Mr. Caldwell, I saw the video. I'm sorry. We're doing everything we can to locate her. We have assets in Mexico, contacts with local authorities. We're going to bring her home. No, you're not. Thomas kept his voice steady. Hartley knows every move the FBI makes before you make it. He's been playing this game for 40 years. You bring in your assets, send in your teams, Sarah dies. Mr. Caldwell, I understand you're upset, but we cannot allow you to engage with this situation on your own. This is a federal matter. Your daughter is a federal officer. We have protocols. Your protocols are going to get her killed. Silence on the other end. Thomas continued, I need you to send me the coordinates. Whatever Hartley sent you, I know he sent them to you too. He wants me to know you're watching. He wants me to know that if I ask for help, you'll try to help, and Sarah will die because of it. We can't just let you walk into Mexico alone. You're a 62-year-old civilian with no tactical support, no intelligence, no backup. It's suicide. Probably, but it's my suicide, my choice. Mr. Caldwell, Agent Chen. Thomas picked up the rifle, felt its familiar weight. I was making kill shots in Grenada before you were born. I know what I'm doing. That was 40 years ago. Some things you don't forget. Another pause. Then Agent Chen said, even if I agreed with you, which I don't, I can't authorize this. I certainly can't provide you with the coordinates. That would make me complicit in whatever happens next. I'm not asking for authorization. I'm telling you what's going to happen. I'm going to Mexico. I'm going to get my daughter back. You can try to stop me, but that just wastes time neither of us has. Thomas heard the agent breathing on the other end of the line. Send me the coordinates, please. The silence stretched out for 10 seconds, 15. Then Agent Chen said, I'm going to regret this. Probably. The coordinates are 29.6847 north, 104.7521 west. That's approximately 40 kilometers south of Presidio in Chihuahua State. The terrain is rough, desert and mountains, no roads in the immediate area. Thomas wrote the numbers on the back of his electric bill. Thank you. Mr. Caldwell, wait. Yes, I'm going to have surveillance assets in the area. Satellites, drones, whatever I can get authorized. I can't send in teams without risking your daughter, but I can watch. If you get in trouble, if you need extraction, I can have birds in the air in 20 minutes. Don't! Thomas folded the piece of paper and put it in his pocket. If I see drones, if I see any indication you're watching, I'm going to assume Hartley sees it too, and Sarah dies. You want to help? Stay away, let me handle this. You're asking me to let a civilian walk into a hostage situation in a foreign country with no support. I can't do that. You're not letting me do anything. I'm doing it whether you like it or not. The question is whether you're going to make it harder. Agent Chen let out a long breath. You understand this is probably a trap. Hartley wants you dead as much as he wants revenge. Maybe more. I know, and you're going anyway. She's my daughter. The words hung in the air between them. Finally, Agent Chen said, God help you, Mr. Caldwell. God stopped helping me a long time ago. Thomas ended the call. The kitchen was very quiet. Somewhere outside, a mourning dove called, the sound low and mournful. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. Thomas unwrapped the rifle. The metal gleamed in the morning light, streaming through the window. He worked the bolt. It moved smoothly, well-oiled, despite the years of neglect. His grandfather had taught him to care for weapons. Clean them, respect them. A well-maintained rifle was a tool. A neglected rifle was a liability. He would need ammunition. His reloading bench was in the garage, covered in dust and old cobwebs. He would need to fire the rifle, make sure it was still zeroed. He would need supplies, water, food, medical kit, maps. He would need help. Thomas picked up his phone again and scrolled through his contacts. The list was short. Pizza delivery, VA hospital, the feed store, and one name he had not called in 6 months. Robert Martinez. Doc had been Thomas's spotter in Grenada. They had served together for 8 months in 1983 during Operation Urgent Fury. Doc had saved Thomas's life at Firebase Rachel. Thomas had saved Doc's life at least twice. They had shared a bond that civilians could never understand, forged in mud and blood and the absolute certainty that the only thing keeping you alive was the man next to you. After the war, they had stayed in touch. Christmas cards, occasional phone calls. Doc had settled in El Paso, married a woman named Rosa, raised 2 children. He had done well for himself, owned a gun shop, had grandchildren, lived the kind of normal, peaceful life that Thomas had never managed to achieve. The last time they had spoken was at Mary's funeral. Doc had driven 4 hours from El Paso to be there. He had stood with Thomas at the grave while Sarah refused to look at either of them. Afterward, Doc had said, "You need anything, brother, you call me. Anytime, day or night." Thomas had not called. He called now. The phone rang 4 times, then a familiar voice, rougher than Thomas remembered, said, "This better be important." I was asleep. "Doctor, it's Thomas." A pause, then, "Tommy? Jesus Christ, man, it's been forever. You okay?" "No." Thomas heard rustling on the other end. Doc, sitting up in bed, suddenly alert. "What's wrong?" "It's Sarah. She's been taken. Held hostage in Mexico. I need help." "Tell me." Thomas told him. The whole story. The kidnapping, the video, Hartley, the ultimatum. When he finished, there was a long silence. Then Doc said, "Jack Hartley. Son of a bitch. I thought he was dead." "So did I. And he wants you to walk into Mexico alone. Make some kind of Wild West showdown shot, 2,000 meters, with a rifle you haven't touched in 8 years. Yes, Tommy, that's suicide. Probably, but you're going anyway. She's my daughter, Doc." Another silence, then, "I'm coming with you." Number Thomas gripped the phone tighter. "You've got a family, grandkids. You can't." "The hell I can't." Doc's voice was firm. "You were my brother in Grenada. You're my brother now. You think I'm going to let you do this alone?" "Doc, listen to me. This is not your fight." "Bullshit. Any fight you're in is my fight. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked." Thomas closed his eyes. He felt something unfamiliar. Something he had not felt in a very long time. Not hope, exactly, but something close to it. "I need to be in El Paso by tonight. Can you help me get ready?" "I can do better than that." Doc was fully awake now, his voice taking on the crisp efficiency Thomas remembered from their military days. "I've got weapons, ammunition, tactical gear, everything you need. And Tommy, I hate to say this, but you're not the shooter you used to be. Your eyes, your hands. When's the last time you qualified?" 8 years ago, I missed the target. Then you need a spotter. You need someone to read wind, calculate range, watch your back. You need me. Thomas wanted to argue, wanted to tell Doc to stay home, stay safe, stay with his family. But he knew Doc was right. Going alone was suicide. Going with help, even limited help, gave him a chance. A small chance, but a chance. "Okay, I'll get everything ready." Doc was already moving. Thomas could hear it in his voice. "You drive to El Paso. Should take you about 4 hours from your ranch. Come straight to the shop. We'll gear up and head out tonight." "Tonight?" "Hartley gave you 48 hours. That means you've got until tomorrow morning. We cross the border tonight, get in position before dawn. We have the advantage." "What advantage?" "We're the ones doing the stalking instead of walking into whatever kill box he's prepared." Doc paused. "Tommy, this is bad. You know that, right? Even with me spotting, even with perfect conditions, a 2,000-meter shot is nearly impossible. And that's assuming Hartley plays fair, which he won't." "I know, but you're doing it anyway. She's my daughter." Those 3 words again, the only explanation that mattered. "All right," Doc's voice softened. "Then we do this right. We do this smart. And maybe, just maybe, we both come home. Maybe. See you in 4 hours, brother. Documentatia." "Yeah? Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We might both be dead by tomorrow." The call ended. Thomas stood in his kitchen, holding his dead wife's coffee mug, looking at his grandfather's rifle, thinking about his daughter in a cage in Mexico. 48 hours. He had 48 hours to drive to El Paso, gear up, cross into Mexico, locate Hartley's compound, and make a shot that most snipers would consider impossible under perfect conditions. He had failing eyesight, shaking hands, a body that had started falling apart 20 years ago and had not stopped. He had not fired a rifle in 8 years. He had not been on a mission in 40 years. This was not a rescue operation. This was a suicide run dressed up as a rescue operation. But Sarah was alive. And while she was alive, he had a reason to be alive too. Thomas went to his bedroom and pulled out the duffel bag he had used in the Marines. It still had his name stenciled on the side in faded black letters. Caldwell. He threw in clothes, boots, his old field jacket, moth-eaten but still serviceable. From the bathroom, he'd grabbed his medications. All of them. He had no idea what he would need, so he took everything. In the kitchen, he filled a canteen with water, made 3 sandwiches and wrapped them in foil, grabbed a box of energy bars from the cupboard. He was moving on autopilot now, muscle memory from 100 field operations, 1,000 training exercises. Pack light, pack smart. Bring what you need, leave what you don't. The rifle went into its case. He added a cleaning kit, oil, bore brush, patches. By the time he finished, the sun was fully up. The temperature had climbed into the 90s. It was going to be a scorcher. Thomas loaded the duffel bag and rifle case into his truck. The truck was a 2003 Ford F-150, brown with rust spots and a cracked windshield. It burned oil and the air conditioning had stopped working 2 years ago. But it ran. That was all that mattered. Before leaving, Thomas went back into the house one more time. He walked through the room slowly, looking at everything with the attention of a man who might not see them again. The living room with Mary's furniture and Mary's photographs on the wall. The kitchen, where they had eaten breakfast together for 30 years. The bedroom where she had died while he was on a hunting trip, unreachable, absent, failing her one final time. Thomas stopped in his office. On the desk, pushed to the back, was a photograph in a silver frame. Sarah, age 8, sitting on a horse. She was grinning at the camera, missing her 2 front teeth. Thomas had taken the picture. One of the last good days before everything started falling apart. He picked up the photograph and looked at it for a long time. "I'm coming, baby girl. Hold on, I'm coming." He put the photograph in his pocket. In the nightstand drawer, the loaded revolver waited next to the suicide note. Thomas looked at both of them. Then he closed the drawer. Not today. Outside, the West Texas sun beat down on brown grass and dust in the endless rolling hills. Thomas climbed into his truck and started the engine. It coughed to life, black smoke belching from the exhaust. He drove down the long dirt driveway, past the barn and the pastures and the mesquite trees. At the gate, he stopped and looked back at the ranch house. White paint peeling, roof sagging, porch steps rotting. Home. The word felt strange. He had lived here for 62 years, but it had not felt like home since Mary died. It had felt like a mausoleum, a place to wait for death. Now driving away, possibly for the last time, Thomas felt something shift inside him. He was not waiting anymore. He was moving. The gate clanged shut behind him. The truck rolled onto the county road, heading east toward El Paso, toward Robert Martinez and weapons and tactical gear. Toward Mexico, toward Sarah, toward a shot that would either save her life or end his. Thomas drove fast, pushing the old truck to 70, then 80. The engine whined. The frame rattled. The West Texas landscape blurred past, all browns and tans, and the occasional shock of green where water pooled. His hands were steady on the steering wheel. For the first time in 5 years, Thomas Caldwell had a purpose. For the first time in 5 years, he had a reason to live, even if that reason might kill him. The drive to El Paso took 3 hours and 47 minutes. Thomas stopped once at a gas station outside Fort Stockton to fuel up and use the bathroom. The attendant was a young man, maybe 25, with tattooed forearms and a nose ring. He looked at Thomas the way young people always looked at old men, with polite indifference, with the quiet certainty that whatever struggles the old faced were not interesting, not relevant, already decided by the simple fact of age. Thomas paid cash and left without speaking. Back on the interstate, the landscape rolled past in shades of brown and tan. West Texas stretched out forever, flat and hostile and beautiful in its emptiness. The kind of country that killed you if you were not careful. The kind of country that made men hard or broke them trying. Thomas had been born in this country, had learned to shoot on this land, taught by his grandfather Robert, who had learned in Korea, 3 generations of Caldwell men, each one carrying forward the craft of precision violence, each one paying the cost that came with it. Robert Caldwell had come home from Korea with frostbite scars and nightmares. He had never spoken about the war, except in the pages of his journal, words written in tight, controlled handwriting that revealed more in what they did not say than in what they did. Thomas's father had not served, born too late for Korea, too early for anything else that came after. He had resented that absence his whole life, had pushed Thomas into the Marines as if his son's service could somehow fill the gap his own generation had left. And Thomas had gone to Grenada at 21 and come home at 22 with a rifle marksmanship badge and a court-martial recommendation that had nearly ended his career before it started. He had learned the cost of conscience in a firefight on a Caribbean hillside, had learned that doing the right thing often meant losing everything else. Now at 62, he was driving toward another war, a smaller war, a personal war, but war nonetheless. The buildings of El Paso appeared on the horizon just after 2 in the afternoon. The city sprawled across the desert, pressed up against the Rio Grande, the border, Mexico. From the interstate, Thomas could see Juarez on the other side, the sister city that was closer than most American towns and infinitely more dangerous. Robert Martinez's gun shop was on the east side in a strip mall between a tattoo parlor and a store that sold quinceañera dresses. The sign read Martinez Arms and Ammunition in faded red letters. A smaller sign in the window said gunsmithing, custom builds, fair prices. Thomas parked in front. His knees protested when he climbed out of the truck. His back sent up its usual complaints. He ignored both and walked to the door. The shop was dark inside, cooler than the street. Racks of rifles lined the walls. Handguns filled display cases. The smell of gun oil and cosmoline hung in the air, familiar and oddly comforting. This was a place that understood tools, understood purpose. Robert Martinez stood behind the counter. He was 68 now, 2 years older than the last time Thomas had seen him. The years showed his hair had gone completely white. His face was more lined, the skin hanging loose around his jaw. But his eyes were sharp, alert, tracking Thomas as he entered. Tommy, documentatia. They looked at each other across the shop. A moment of assessment, 2 old soldiers measuring what remained. Then Doc came around the counter and pulled Thomas into a hard embrace. Thomas felt the bones in Doc's back, too prominent, too easy to count. Felt the way Doc's breathing rattled slightly in his chest. "You look like hell," Doc said, stepping back. "You don't look much better." Doc smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. "Come on, I've got everything set up in the back." The back room was part workshop, part armory. Workbenches lined the walls, covered in gun parts and tools. A gun safe stood open, revealing racks of rifles and shelves of ammunition. In the center of the room, laid out on a table covered in green felt, was everything they would need. 2 rifles, a Remington 700 and .338, Lapua Magnum, matte black with a high power scope, a Barrett M8 2A1 and .50B MG, the big rifle that could punch through engine blocks at a mile. Beside them, boxes of ammunition, hand-loaded, premium brass, match-grade bullets, night vision goggles, rangefinders, a Kestrel weather meter, maps printed on waterproof paper, medical kit, water, MRES, everything organized with military precision. Thomas walked to the table and picked up the Remington. It was heavier than his grandfather's rifle, built for modern cartridges in modern wars. The scope was a Night Force, the kind that cost more than Thomas's truck. Through it, the world would appear sharp and close, distances compressed into targeting solutions. If his eyes could still see through it. "I zeroed it yesterday," Doc said. 500 yards, half-minute of angle. It'll shoot." "What about mine?" Doc gestured to another table. Thomas's grandfather's rifle lay there, partially disassembled. The bolt was out. The barrel had been removed from the stock. "I went through it completely. Cleaned, inspected, rebedded the action. Your grandfather knew what he was doing when he built this. The barrel is still good. Crown is perfect. I test fired it this morning." "And?" Doc hesitated. Then, "Tommy, I need to be straight with you. This rifle is nearly 60 years old. So, the metallurgy is from another era. It was built for .30 caliber rounds that are obsolete now. I can make it shoot, and shoot well, but not at 2,000 meters. Not accurately, not against a target that knows you're coming." Thomas set down the Remington and picked up his grandfather's rifle. The walnut stock was warm under his hands, smooth from decades of use. He could feel his grandfather's hands on this wood, could feel his own young hands, learning to hold it steady, learning to breathe, learning that stillness was more important than strength. "Then we used the Remington for the shot. This one is backup." Doc nodded. "Smart." He moved to the table and started gathering gear. "But Tommy, we need to talk about the plan." "What plan?" "Exactly." Doc looked at him. "Hartley gave you 48 hours and coordinates. That's not a plan, that's a trap. You walk up to those coordinates at the appointed time, you die. Sarah probably dies too. We need to think this through." Thomas pulled out this piece of paper with the coordinates. 29.6847 north, 104.7521 west. "Do you know this area?" Doc took the paper and studied it. Then he walked to a large topographic map pinned to the wall. His finger traced latitude and longitude lines until it stopped at a point roughly 40 kilometers south of the border. Here, he tapped the map. Chihuahua State, Sierra Mojada region, high desert, mountains, no major towns within 50 kilometers. It's cartel country, has been for 20 years. What kind of terrain? Rough, elevations from 4,000 to 7,000 feet. Rocky, dry, limited water sources. It's similar to where we are now, just more remote. Doc leaned closer to the map. If Hartley is set up here, he's got high ground, clear fields of fire, probably solar power and water trucked in. He's dug in. So we don't go to him, we make him come to us. Doc shook his head. He's got Sarah, he controls the timeline. We have to go to him. Then we go smart. We go tonight. Get into position before dawn. Scout the location, find advantages. In the dark, across 40 kilometers of cartel-controlled territory. Doc's voice was flat. Tommy, we're not 20 anymore. We can't hump a ruck 40 clicks and be ready to fight at the end of it. Then we drive as far as we can, walk the rest. In what? Your truck stands out like a sore thumb. My truck is worse. We need something that blends in. Doc walked to a metal cabinet and pulled out 2 sets of clothing. Civilian clothes. Work shirts, canvas pants, straw cowboy hats. The kind of clothes Mexican ranch hands wore. We cross at a remote point. Avoid the official checkpoints. Once we're across, we're just 2 old cowboys looking for work. Nobody looks twice. And our gear? Hidden in the truck bed, under a false bottom I built last year for a customer who needed to transport items he didn't want inspected. Doc pulled out a set of keys. We use my truck. It's older, more beat up, fits the profile. Thomas looked at the gear on the table. The rifles, the ammunition, the high-tech optics. Then he looked at Doc. Why are you doing this? Doc was quiet for a moment. Then you remember Firebase Rachel? Thomas remembered. October 1983. The Firebase had been overrun. Nearly overrun. Thomas could still see it in his mind with perfect clarity. The wire breached. Enemy soldiers pouring through. Lieutenant Hartley screaming retreat orders. 28 wounded men who could not retreat, could not run, could only wait to die. Thomas had disobeyed the order, had called artillery on his own position. Danger close, 50 meters from the perimeter, close enough that the explosions had thrown him against a bunker wall and left his ears ringing for 3 days. Doc had been beside him. Doc had stayed when everyone else ran. Doc had helped call in the fire mission, had helped drag wounded men to cover, had put a tourniquet on Thomas's arm when shrapnel opened it to the bone. The artillery had stopped the assault. The wounded had been evacuated. 28 men had lived who should have died. Hartley had tried to take credit, had filed a report claiming he had directed the artillery fire, had made the tough call, had saved the day. Doc and 6 other men had testified otherwise, had told the truth, had gotten Hartley court-martialed and themselves marked as troublemakers. I remember, Thomas said. You saved my life that day. Doc's voice was steady. You saved 28 lives. You did the right thing and it cost you, cost all of us, but it was still right. He walked to the window and looked out at the street. I've had 40 years since then. 40 years that I shouldn't have had. Met Rosa, had my kids, got to hold my grandchildren. All because you called in that fire mission. Because you didn't retreat. Doc turned back to Thomas. Sarah is your daughter, but this fight is about more than her. It's about Firebase Rachel. It's about doing the right thing even when the cost is high. And Tommy, I'm not letting you do this alone. Thomas felt something in his chest, something that had been frozen for 5 years beginning to thaw. Not hope, not yet, but something like it. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We might both be dead by tomorrow. They spent the next 2 hours preparing. Doc showed Thomas how to use the Night Force scope, how to read the ballistic reticle, how to dial in corrections for range and wind. Thomas's hands shook as he practiced, and his right eye struggled to focus through the magnification. Doc noticed. He said nothing, but Thomas saw the concern in his face. They loaded the truck. The rifles went into the false bottom compartment, along with ammunition and tactical gear. The medical kit went under the front seat. Water and food went in a battered cooler that looked like it had been used for 30 years of construction jobs. By the time they finished, the sun was setting. The temperature had dropped from 105 to a merely unbearable 98. Rosa Martinez appeared in the doorway of the shop. She was 65, small and round, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She looked at Thomas for a long moment. Then she walked to him and took his hands in hers. Bring him back. It was not a request. I'll try. Rosa's grip tightened. Her hands were strong from decades of work. Not try. Bring him back. He is all I have. Then she turned to Doc and kissed him. It was a long kiss, the kind of kiss shared by people who have been together for 40 years and know exactly what they stand to lose. Te amo, she whispered. Te amo, Rosa. She left without looking back. Doc and Thomas climbed into the truck. Doc drove. He knew the roads, knew which checkpoints to avoid, knew where the border was soft. They drove west as the sun sank behind the mountains. The sky turned orange, then purple, then the deep blue of desert twilight. Stars appeared, more than Thomas had seen in years, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. The border crossing was 20 miles west of El Paso, in a remote area where the Rio Grande ran shallow and slow. No fence here, no patrol, just the river and the desert and the invisible line that meant everything and nothing. Doc parked the truck in a grove of cottonwood trees. They waited for full dark. You scared? Doc asked. Yes. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. I haven't been sharp in 10 years. Doc smiled. Then I guess you're about to find out if you still can be. They crossed at 9:30, wading through the Rio Grande in their boots, the water barely knee-deep. Mexico looked exactly like Texas. Same desert, same stars, same hot wind carrying the smell of creosote and dust. But it felt different. It felt like leaving the world behind. Doc drove without headlights, navigating by moonlight and memory. The road was barely a road, 2 ruts through the desert, winding between mesquite and cactus. They saw no other vehicles, no lights, nothing but the vastness of northern Mexico at night. After an hour, Doc pulled off the road and killed the engine. We walk from here. They pulled the gear from the hidden compartment. Thomas strapped on a pack that weighed 60 pounds. It felt like 600. His shoulders protested immediately. His knees threatened to buckle. Doc's pack was lighter, maybe 40 pounds, but he was breathing hard just getting it on. 2 old men, Thomas thought, pretending we still have what it takes. They walked. The desert at night was beautiful and merciless. The moon was 3/4 full, bright enough to see by, bright enough to cast shadows. The temperature had dropped into the 70s, almost comfortable. Almost. But the terrain was brutal. Rocks everywhere, loose and treacherous. Cactus waiting to grab clothing and skin. Dry washes that appeared without warning, deep enough to break an ankle in the darkness. Thomas fell twice in the first kilometer. His night vision was poor, his depth perception worse. Doc helped him up both times, saying nothing. They rested every 30 minutes. Thomas's heart hammered in his chest, his breath came in gasps, his legs trembled with exhaustion. This is pathetic, he said during the 3rd rest stop. This is reality. Doc was breathing hard too, wheezing slightly. We're old, Tommy. Our bodies don't work like they used to. All we can do is keep moving. What if I can't make the shot? The question had been building in Thomas since the moment he saw the video of Sarah. Now, in the darkness of the Mexican desert, it finally escaped. Doc was quiet for a long time. Then, if you can't make it, I will. You're not the shooter, I am. I was good enough in Grenada. I can be good enough now. At 2,000 meters, if I have to be, Thomas looked at his friend. Even in the moonlight, he could see how much the walk had cost Doc. Could see the pain in how he held himself, favoring his left side. Could see the way his breathing rattled. You're sick. It was not a question. Doc smiled. You always could read me. How bad? Bad enough. Lung cancer, stage 3. They caught it 6 months ago. Jesus Christ, Doc, why didn't you tell me? Because you'd have tried to stop me from coming. Doc shifted his pack, wincing. I've got maybe a year, maybe less. Chemo might buy me 6 months, but at a cost. At my age, sometimes the treatment is worse than the disease. Rosa knows. Rosa knows. The kids don't. I told her if this trip goes bad, tell them I went helping a brother. That's the truth that matters. Thomas felt anger rising in him, hot and sudden. You could be home, with your family, with your grandkids. Instead, you're out here dying in the Mexican desert for my mistakes. Not your mistakes. Doc's voice was firm. My choice. And Tommy, I meant what I said earlier. You gave me 40 years I shouldn't have had. If I spend my last year helping you save your daughter, that's a good trade. I can't lose you too. You already lost me. Doc gestured at his own body. Nepal. This thing is failing whether I'm in El Paso or Mexico. At least here, I'm useful. At least here, I'm still the man I used to be. They sat in silence for a while. Around them, the desert breathed. Small sounds in the darkness. Mice moving through brush. The distant call of a coyote. The wind pushing sand against rock. Finally, Doc said, "We should move. We've got another 10 kilometers to the coordinates." They walked. The kilometers passed slowly. The moon climbed higher, then began its descent toward the western horizon. Thomas lost track of time. There was only the next step, the next rock, the next breath. His pack straps cut into his shoulders. Blisters formed on his heels despite his old broken-in boots. His lower back locked up twice, forcing him to stop and stretch until the spasm passed. Doc fared no better. His coughing got worse as the night wore on, dry, hacking coughs that ended with him spitting into the sand. Thomas pretended not to notice the darkness of what he spit. At 3 in the morning, they reached a ridge that overlooked a valley. Doc pulled out binoculars and glassed the area below. "There," he handed the binoculars to Thomas. It took Thomas's eyes a moment to adjust, a moment to focus through the lenses. Then he saw it. A compound. 2 buildings, low and square, made of concrete or adobe. Solar panels on the roofs. A generator shed. 3 vehicles parked in a rough semicircle. And in the center of the compound, visible even at this distance, a cage made of chain-link fence. Sarah was inside. Thomas could not see her clearly at this range, but he could see movement. Someone alive. Someone waiting. His daughter. "Range," he said, his voice rough. Doc pulled out the laser rangefinder. He took several measurements, calculating distances to different points in the compound. 2,840 meters from this position to the main building. 2,900 to the cage. Wind is calm now, but that will change at sunrise. Temperature is 76 degrees, humidity is low. Thomas lowered the binoculars. His hands were shaking worse now, fatigue and stress combining with the tremor that had become his constant companion. "Can you make that shot?" Doc asked. "I don't know." The truth felt like defeat. Doc studied the compound through his own binoculars. After a moment, he said, "There's another ridge, closer, maybe 1,500 meters from the compound, but it's more exposed, less cover. Hartley will have it watched." "Probably, but if we can get there, if we can set up before dawn, you'd have a better angle, a shorter shot." Thomas looked at the closer ridge. It was a knife edge of rock, bare and exposed. Anyone watching would see them immediately. But it was closer, and closer meant a shot he might actually make. "We go for it." They moved down from their current position and began working their way around the valley. The terrain got worse, steeper, more broken. Several times they had to backtrack, finding new routes around impassable sections. Dawn was less than 2 hours away when they finally reached the base of the closer ridge. Thomas looked up at it, a 40-foot climb over loose scree and exposed rock. His body had nothing left to give. Doc saw it. "Rest here, I'll climb up and scout it." Thomas forced himself to start climbing. "If this is where we make our stand, I need to know the position." The climb took 20 minutes. By the time Thomas hauled himself over the top edge, his vision was swimming. His heart felt like it was trying to escape his chest. Every breath was a knife, but the position was perfect. A narrow shelf of rock, maybe 10 feet wide, with a low ridge providing cover from below. Clear lines of sight to the compound. Distance of exactly 1,512 meters, according to Doc's rangefinder. They set up quickly. Doc pulled out the Remington and began assembling the shooting position. Bipod extended, sandbag under the rear of the stock for stability, scope covers removed. Thomas lay behind the rifle and looked through the Night Force scope. The compound leaped into clarity. He could see details now. The chain-link cage was 12 feet square, maybe 8 feet tall. Sarah sat inside, her back against one corner, her knees drawn up to her chest. Even at this distance, even through the scope, Thomas could see the bruises on her face. His finger touched the trigger, the familiar shape of it, the curve of steel that separated intent from action. Movement. A man stepped out of the main building, tall, thin, moving with careful deliberation, Jack Hartley. He looked old, looked sick, but he moved to the cage with purpose, stood looking down at Sarah, and even without hearing the words, Thomas could read the cruelty in his posture. "I could take him now," Thomas said. "Don't!" Doc was setting up his spotting scope beside Thomas. "This isn't about revenge, it's about Sarah. We wait, we watch, we learn the pattern, then we make our move." The sky was beginning to lighten in the east. Dawn was coming. With it, heat, wind. All the variables that would make an already impossible shot even harder. Thomas settled in behind the rifle and watched the man who had destroyed his life twice, 40 years apart. And he waited for his chance to end it. The sun rose over the Mexican desert like a judgment. The temperature climbed from 70 to 80 to 90 in the first hour. The wind picked up, gusting from the southeast, variable and unpredictable. Through the scope, Thomas watched the compound come to life. 4 men emerged from the smaller building. Cartel soldiers, probably. Young, armed with AK pattern rifles, moving with the casual alertness of men who live with violence. They did not look like professionals. They looked like farm kids with guns, which made them dangerous in a different way. Unpredictable, likely to panic. Hartley appeared again at 7. He walked to the cage and spoke to Sarah. Thomas could not hear the words, but he could see Sarah's response. She stood, faced him, did not back down. "That's my girl," Thomas whispered. Doc was scanning the compound with his spotting scope, making notes on a waterproof pad. Guard rotation every 2 hours. 4 men on duty, probably 4 more resting. Hartley is the only American. The others are local. No fortifications beyond the buildings themselves. What about weapons? A KS for the guards. I saw a heavier rifle in the main building window. Maybe a Dragunov or a hunting rifle. Hartley is armed, pistol on his hip. Thomas's radio crackled. The sound made both men freeze. They had not turned it on, had not keyed it. Then Hartley's voice came through, distant but clear. "Good morning, Ghost. I know you're out there. I've been waiting for you." Thomas looked at Doc. Doc shook his head, equally surprised. Hartley continued, "You're probably on one of the ridges overlooking my compound. Probably thinking you're being clever. Thinking you'll set up, take the shot, be the hero." A pause. "Here's the problem. You're not the only one who knows this terrain. I've been here for 3 months. I've mapped every ridge, every approach, every position where a sniper might set up. And I've got motion sensors. Simple things, cheap, but effective." Thomas's stomach dropped. "You tripped one about 30 minutes ago. Western approach, elevation 6,200 feet. That puts you on the close ridge, the one that gives you an easier shot." Doc did the math, 1,500 meters, give or take. Smart play. Hartley's laugh was dry, humorless. "But you walked into my trap, Thomas, just like I knew you would. Because you're predictable. Because you're desperate. Because you're old and broken, and you think this is your last chance at redemption." Movement in the compound. The 4 guards were fanning out, taking cover behind the vehicles. "Here's what's going to happen. My men have RPGs, rocket-propelled grenades. Soviet surplus, easy to get in Mexico. They're going to start putting rounds on your position in about 2 minutes. You can try to run, but you're old and slow and they know where you are. Or you can stay and get blown to pieces." Thomas grabbed his pack, ready to move. Doc caught his arm. "Wait!" Hartley's voice again. "Unless you want to do this my way, the way I planned. You come down, Ghost. Walk into my compound, unarmed, hands on your head. You do that, I let Sarah live long enough for you to say goodbye. Then we have our duel, fair and square. 2,000 meters, 1 shot each. You win, she lives. You lose, you both die. But at least you tried. At least you went down fighting." The radio went silent. Doc was already packing gear. "We move now." Thomas looked through the scope one more time. Sarah was standing at the cage wall, looking toward the ridges, looking for him. "I'm going in," Thomas said. "Like hell you are." Doc grabbed the rifle. "That's suicide. He wants you dead and humiliated. We find another way." "There is no other way." Thomas stood, ignoring the protest from his knees. "You heard him. He's got RPGs. We run, they blow us up. We stay, they blow us up. I go in, Sarah lives long enough for a chance." "A chance at what? You can't make a 2,000-meter shot. Not with your eyes, not with your hands. You know it. I know it. Hartley knows it." Thomas looked at his friend. The sun was fully up now, harsh and bright. Doc's face was gaunt in the light, sick, dying. Here anyway, because loyalty mattered more than life. "Then you make the shot." "What?" Thomas pulled out his sidearm, checked the magazine. 15 rounds. He had 2 spare magazines in his pocket. 45 rounds total. Not enough for a firefight, but enough to buy time. "I go in. I keep Hartley's attention. You stay here. Set up the Barrett. That rifle can reach 2,000 meters. You're a better shot than you think. You always were." "Tommy, I haven't made a shot like that in 40 years. Neither have I. But one of us has to try, and I need you alive to make it. So I'm the distraction. You're the solution. The radio crackled again. Time's up, Ghost. I'm giving the order. Last chance to walk in. Thomas keyed his radio. I'm coming. Give me 10 minutes. Smart choice. Leave your weapons. Come alone. Hands on your head. Any deviation, I shoot, Sarah. Understood. Thomas started stripping off gear. His sidearm stayed hidden in the small of his back, concealed under his shirt. Everything else went to Doc. The extra magazines, the night vision, everything. Doc watched, his face unreadable. Finally, he said, "This is a bad plan. It's the only plan we have. If you die, I'm going to be very angry. If I die, shoot the bastard twice, once for me." Thomas started down the ridge. His legs were shaking, from fear or fatigue or both. Behind him, he heard Doc setting up the Barrett, the big rifle that could kill at 2 miles. The rifle that might save Sarah or might just make her an orphan. The descent was treacherous in daylight. Loose rock, steep angles. Thomas slipped, twice, caught himself, kept moving. When he reached the valley floor, the 4 guards were waiting. They searched him roughly, found the hidden pistol almost immediately. One of them spoke into a radio in Spanish. A moment later, Hartley appeared at the compound entrance. Well, the ghost in the flesh. You look even worse than I expected." Thomas said nothing. He kept his hands visible and walked forward. The compound was exactly what it had looked like through the scope. 2 buildings, solar panels, generator, and in the center, Sarah in her cage. She saw him. Her eyes went wide. "Dad? Oh God, Dad, what are you doing?" "Saving you, baby girl." Hartley gestured to the guards. They grabbed Thomas and forced him to his knees in front of the cage, close enough that he could reach through the chain link and touch Sarah's hand. He did. Her fingers were cold despite the heat. He squeezed them. "I'm sorry. For everything. For Mary. For not being there. For all of it." Sarah was crying. "Dad, you shouldn't have come. He's going to kill you." "Maybe, but at least I showed up, finally." Hartley walked over. He had a rifle now, a hunting rifle with a scope. He looked at it lovingly, then looked at Thomas. "You want to know the funny thing? I actually respected you once. Firebase Rachel, you made the call. I didn't have the balls to make. You saved those men. You were a hero." "Then why the court-martial?" "Because you made me look weak. Made me look like a coward. In the military, perception is reality. You ruined my perception, so you ruined my reality." Hartley knelt down, putting himself at Thomas's eye level. "But I've had a lot of time to think about it. A lot of years. And you know what I realized? You didn't ruin me. You showed everyone who I really was. A small, petty man who cared more about rank than duty, more about ego than honor." Thomas met his eyes. "If you know that, why are we here?" "Because knowing it doesn't make it hurt less. Because I'm dying and I want someone to die with me. And because deep down I want to know if I can beat the ghost. If I'm actually better than the legend." Hartley stood. "So here's the deal. Tomorrow morning, dawn, we set up at exactly 2,000 meters from each other. You get your grandfather's rifle. I get mine. 1 shot each. First one to hit wins. You win, Sarah goes free. I win, she dies. You die too, of course, but you'll die knowing you tried. Why not just shoot me now? Because that would be too easy. I want you to hope. I want you to believe you might win. I want you to fail in front of your daughter." Hartley walked away. The guards dragged Thomas to a second cage, smaller than Sarah's, and threw him inside. The door clanged shut. A padlock clicked. Thomas lay on the concrete floor, his body screaming from the abuse of the last 12 hours. He could see Sarah 20 feet away, watching him. "I'm sorry," he said again. "Stop saying that!" Sarah's voice was stronger now, angry. "You came. That's more than I expected. More than I deserved after what I said at Mom's funeral. You were right to say it. I wasn't there. You're here now." Thomas laughed. "It hurt." "Yeah, I'm here. A lot of good it does." They sat in their separate cages as the sun climbed higher and the heat became oppressive. No shade, no water. The guards watched them with bored indifference. At noon, Hartley brought water, 1 bottle each. He handed them through the chain link. "Drink, I want you alive for tomorrow." Thomas drank half the bottle and poured the rest over his head. The water was warm, but it helped. Sarah drank all of hers. After Hartley left, Thomas said, "There's something you need to know." Sarah looked at him. "I'm not going to win tomorrow. I can't make the shot. My eyes are going. My hands shake. I haven't been able to hit a target past 1,000 meters in 8 years. Then why did you come? Because you're my daughter. Because I owed you one moment of showing up. Even if it kills me. Sarah closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were dry. No more tears. Doc's out there, isn't he? Thomas nodded, on the ridge, with the Barrett. He's going to try to make the shot. He's going to try. What are his chances? Honestly, maybe 20%. If the wind is calm, if the light is right, if God decides we deserve a miracle. Sarah smiled. It was a sad smile. 20% is better than nothing. Yeah. They were quiet for a long time. The sun began its descent toward the western horizon. The heat persisted, a physical presence that pressed down on everything. Finally, Sarah said, "Tell me about Mom, about the end. I left before it happened. I was angry. I never got to say goodbye." So Thomas told her. He told her about Mary's last weeks, about the hospice nurse who came every day, about the morphine that made her sleep more and wake less, about the afternoon when Mary had been lucid for 10 minutes, long enough to ask where Sarah was, long enough to cry when Thomas said he did not know, about the moment she died at 3 in the morning, alone except for Thomas holding her hand, about the funeral where Sarah had stood so far away she might as well have been in another state. "I failed her," Thomas said. "I was there at the end, but I wasn't there for the middle. For all the years when she needed me and I was deployed or at the range or just too much of a coward to face what was happening." Sarah listened. Then she said, "She loved you anyway. Mom always loved you, even when you didn't deserve it." "I know." The sun set. The guards changed shifts. Hartley did not reappear. Thomas lay in his cage and looked at the stars, the same stars he had seen from his porch every night, the same stars that had looked down on him in Grenada, in all the places where men went to kill and die. He thought about Doc up on the ridge, probably freezing now that the desert night had set in, probably coughing, probably dying a little more with each passing hour. He thought about Sarah, 20 feet away, brave and angry, and so much like her mother it hurt. He thought about Mary, 5 years dead, still the center of every regret. And he thought about tomorrow, about the shot he could not make, about the death that was probably waiting, about whether dying to save his daughter could somehow balance the scales of a life badly lived. He did not know, but tomorrow, one way or another, he would find out. Dawn came slowly to the Mexican desert. The sky lightened from black to deep blue to the pale gray that preceded sunrise. Thomas watched it through the chain link of his cage, his body stiff from a night spent on concrete, his mind turning over the impossible mathematics of what was about to happen. 2,000 meters, 6,561 feet, 1.24 miles. The distance between life and death, measured in the arc of a bullet that would take nearly 5 seconds to reach its target. 5 seconds for wind to push it off course. 5 seconds for gravity to pull it down. 5 seconds for every variable in the universe to conspire against accuracy. Thomas had made shots at that distance before, twice during training in the 1980s under controlled conditions. But that was 40 years ago, when his eyes were sharp and his hands were steady, and his body did what he told it to do. Now at 62, with vision that blurred at the edges and hands that shook even at rest, the shot was not just difficult. It was impossible. Sarah stirred in her cage. She had managed to sleep somehow. Youth gave her that gift, the ability to find rest even in captivity, even knowing what morning would bring. Thomas had not slept, could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Mary's face, saw the disappointment there, the quiet resignation of a woman married to a man who was never quite present, never quite enough. He had failed her, failed Sarah, failed everyone who had ever depended on him. Today would be no different. A door opened. Hartley emerged from the main building, moving slowly, a cup of coffee in his hand. He wore clean clothes, khaki pants, a white shirt. He had shaved, made himself presentable for the occasion. The man was dying. Thomas could see it in how he moved, in the careful way he lowered himself into a chair, in the yellow tint of his skin that spoke of a liver struggling to function. 6 months, Hartley had said. Pancreatic cancer. One of the worst ways to go. Slow, painful, certain. Hartley sipped his coffee and looked at Thomas across the compound. "Sleep well, Ghost?" Thomas said nothing. "No, I don't imagine you did. Hard to sleep when you know you're going to fail. When you know your daughter is going to watch you miss the shot that could save her life." Hartley stood and walked to Sarah's cage. "Your father was a legend once, did you know that?" The Ghost. They called him that because after he made a kill, he disappeared. Vanished into the hills like smoke. The enemy thought he was supernatural, some kind of demon. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. But he's not supernatural. He's just a man, an old, broken man who's about to discover that legends die the same as everyone else. Hartley turned to the guards. Bring him out. It's time. Two guards unlocked Thomas's cage and pulled him to his feet. His legs buckled. They had gone numb during the night, circulation cut off by the way he had been sitting. The guards held him up until feeling returned in a rush of pins and needles. They walked him to the center of the compound. A table had been set up. On it, Thomas's grandfather's rifle, the Remington 700 that had been built in 1967, that had seen limited action in the 1980s, that carried the weight of 3 generations. Next to it, Hartley's rifle, a newer model, custom-built, equipped with a Schmidt and Bender scope that probably cost more than Thomas's truck. The guards released Thomas. He stood swaying, looking at the rifle that had defined his life. Go ahead, Hartley said. Check it. Make sure it's in working order. I want no excuses when you miss. Thomas picked up the rifle. The walnut stock was warm from the morning sun. He worked the bolt. Smooth. Checked the chamber. Empty. The magazine held 5 rounds of .308 Winchester ammunition. Federal gold medal match. Premium stuff. He brought the rifle to his shoulder and looked through the scope. The reticle was sharp. The glass was clean. Everything functioned as it should. The problem was not the rifle. The problem was him. Satisfied? Hartley picked up his own rifle, cradling it like a lover. Then let's discuss the rules. He gestured to the desert beyond the compound. 2,000 meters, due east. I'll be standing on that ridge. He pointed to a rock formation barely visible in the morning light. You'll be here. When the sun clears the horizon, we both take our shot, simultaneously. First one to hit wins. And if we both miss, then we reload and try again. Best of 3, fair and square. Thomas looked at the ridge where Hartley would stand. The distance was exact. He knew without measuring. 2,000 meters. The signature shot of his career. The shot that had been written about in training manuals and tactical journals. The shot he could no longer make. One more thing, Hartley said. He walked to Sarah's cage and pulled out a key. I'm going to unlock this. Give her a chance to run if things go badly. But here's the catch. He gestured to 2 guards who took up positions on either side of the cage, rifles pointed at Sarah. She runs before the duel is over. They shoot her. She tries anything heroic. They shoot her. She so much as looks at them wrong, they shoot her. Understand? Sarah's voice was steady. I understand. Good. Hartley unlocked the cage door and swung it open. Sarah stepped out, blinking in the brightening light. She looked at Thomas. He saw fear there and anger and something else. Hope. God help her, she still had hope. Hartley handed Thomas a radio. We stay in contact during the approach. I want to hear you breathing. Want to know you're not trying anything clever. You deviate from the path, Sarah dies. You try to run, Sarah dies. You do anything except walk to your position and take your shot, Sarah dies. Thomas clipped the radio to his belt. Hartley turned to his men and spoke in rapid Spanish. Thomas caught enough to understand. If the old man wins, kill the girl anyway. Kill them both. So this was always going to end in death. Thomas had known it, on some level, had known from the moment he saw the video that this was not about justice or honor or settling old scores. This was about Hartley's ego, about a dying man desperate to prove he mattered. Hartley picked up his rifle and started walking east. The sun was a sliver of gold on the horizon now, painting the desert in shades of amber and red. Thomas picked up his grandfather's rifle and walked west. The radio crackled. I can hear you walking, Ghost. Keep moving. The desert stretched out before him. 2,000 meters. At a normal pace, a 20-minute walk. But Thomas was not moving at a normal pace. His legs trembled with exhaustion. His breathing was labored. The rifle felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Behind him, Sarah stood in the open cage door, flanked by guards, watching her father walk to his death. Thomas keyed the radio. Sarah, I need you to know something. Don't. Her voice came back, tight with emotion. Don't say goodbye. I'm not. I'm saying I love you. I should have said it more. Should have said it every day. But I'm saying it now, I love you. Silence, then I love you too, Dad. Hartley's voice cut in. How touching. Keep walking, Ghost. You've got 15 more minutes. Thomas walked. The terrain was rough, rocky, covered in low scrub and cactus. He stumbled twice, caught himself, kept moving. The sun climbed higher. The temperature rose. Sweat soaked his shirt despite the early hour. At 1,000 meters from the compound, he stopped to rest. His heart hammered against his ribs. His vision swam. The rifle shook in his hands. The radio crackled. "You look tired, Ghost." Hartley's voice was almost sympathetic. "Your spotter is probably watching you right now through his scope. Probably seeing the same thing I'm seeing. An old man who can't finish what he started." Doc was watching. Thomas knew it without looking for him. Doc was up on that ridge 2,000 meters away, setting up the Barrett, calculating range and wind, preparing to make a shot that might save them all, or might just get them all killed. "Keep moving," Hartley said. Thomas walked. At 1,500 meters, he had to stop again. His legs refused to go further without rest. He sat on a rock and fought to catch his breath. The sun was fully up now, a merciless white disk in a sky gone pale with heat. Through the haze, he could see Hartley on the eastern ridge, a small figure barely visible, 2,000 meters away. An impossible shot. The radio came to life. "Final approach, Ghost. Take your position. The sun is almost ready." Thomas stood, walked the last 500 meters, found a flat spot with good sight lines, set up his shooting position. Bipod extended, rifle settled, body prone behind it. He looked through the scope. Hartley appeared, magnified but still distant. The man was setting up his own shooting position, taking his time, making it perfect. Thomas's hands were shaking so badly that the reticle danced across Hartley's body. Chest, head, shoulder. Chest again. No stability, no control. He tried to steady his breathing. In, out, the way his grandfather had taught him, the way he had taught hundreds of students over the years. But his body would not cooperate, would not calm, would not be the tool he needed it to be. The radio crackled one last time. "Sun's up, Ghost, on 3. 1, 2, 3. Thomas's finger found the trigger. He squeezed. The rifle bucked against his shoulder. The report was sharp, flat, swallowed by the vastness of the desert. The bullet launched at 2,800 feet per second, beginning its long arc toward a target that was already moving. Through the scope, Thomas watched his bullet's impact. 6 feet to the left of Hartley, striking rock, throwing up a puff of dust. A miss. An absolute, undeniable, catastrophic miss. Hartley's shot came half a second later. Thomas heard the crack of it passing overhead, felt the displacement of air. Close. Too close. But also a miss. Hartley's voice on the radio, tight with frustration. "Round 2. Reload." Thomas's hands shook as he worked the bolt, extracted the spent casing, chambered a fresh round. His vision blurred. Sweat ran into his eyes. He could not make this shot. The knowledge settled over him like a physical weight. He could not make this shot. Not at 2,000 meters. Not with hands that would not stop shaking. Not with eyes that could not focus properly. He was going to miss. Sarah was going to. And it would be his fault. Just like Mary. Just like everything else. "Take your time, Ghost." Hartley sounded almost cheerful now. "We've got all morning." Thomas settled behind the rifle again. Found Hartley in the scope. The man was standing now, exposed, confident, daring Thomas to hit him. The wind was picking up. Thomas could feel it on his face, maybe 8 miles per hour. Coming from the south, that would push the bullet right. He needed to compensate, needed to hold left. But how much? His grandfather's voice came to him, memory speaking across decades of silence. "Don't force the shot. Wait for the conditions." Thomas waited, watching the wind, watching the heat shimmer rising from the rocks, watching Hartley's small, distant figure. 30 seconds passed. The wind dropped. For a moment, maybe 5 seconds, the air went still. Thomas fired. The bullet flew true for the first 1,000 meters. Then the wind caught it, pushed it, sent it drifting right despite his compensation. 4 feet to the right of Hartley. Another miss. Hartley's return shot was better. It struck the rock 2 feet in front of Thomas's position. Fragments of stone stung his face. "Round 3, Hartley said. "Now I'm bumping you, son. Last chance, Ghost." Thomas reloaded. His fingers fumbled the cartridge. Dropped it. Had to fish a new one from his pocket. Chambered it finally, his hand shaking so badly he could barely work the bolt. This was it. The last shot. After this, Hartley would declare victory, would order Sarah killed, would end this farce that had masqueraded as a fair fight. Thomas looked through the scope one more time and saw something that made his heart stop. Hartley was not alone on the ridge. There was a second figure, smaller, moving up from behind, moving fast. Sarah. She must have run, must have slipped on away during the duel while the guards were distracted. She was climbing the ridge, moving with the kind of desperate speed that comes from absolute necessity. Thomas keyed the radio. Sarah, no, get back. Too late. Sarah reached the top of the ridge and launched herself at Hartley. She had picked up a rock, a piece of volcanic stone the size of a softball. It came down on Hartley's head with audible force. Hartley collapsed. His rifle tumbled from his hands. The guards in the compound saw it, opened fire. Bullets kicked up dust around Sarah as she grabbed Hartley's rifle and threw herself behind cover. Thomas was already moving, running. His legs screamed in protest, but he ignored them. 2,000 meters. He had to cover 2,000 meters while his daughter was pinned down by automatic weapons fire. He would never make it. The radio, Hartley's radio, still clipped to his belt. Thomas grabbed it as he ran. Doctor, if you can hear me, I need that shot now. For 3 seconds, nothing. Just the sound of Thomas's own breathing, the pounding of his boots on stone, the distant crack of gunfire. Then Doc's voice, calm and steady. I've got her, repositioning, stand by thing. Thomas ran. His chest felt like it was tearing apart. His vision tunneled, but he ran. On the eastern ridge, Sarah was returning fire. Single shots, controlled. She had Hartley's rifle and she was using it like she had been trained. But she was outnumbered, outgunned, pinned down. The guards were advancing on her position, 4 men with AK pattern rifles, laying down suppressive fire, moving by bounds, professional, coordinated. They would reach her in under a minute. Doc, Thomas gasped into the radio. I need that shot. Wind is wrong. Doc's voice was tight. I'm reading 12 miles per hour, gusting to 15. Range is 2,800 meters to the compound. I don't have a clean shot at the guards. Then what do you have? A pause. The generator. The one powering their radio relay. If I take it out, they lose coordination. Might buy Sarah time. Do it. 10 seconds of silence. Thomas was still running, his body on the edge of complete failure. He could see the compound now, could see the guards advancing on the ridge. Then the Barrett spoke. The sound was different from the Remington. Deeper, more authoritative. The sound of a .50 caliber round traveling faster than sound itself, carrying enough energy to punch through engine blocks. The generator exploded. Not just damaged, destroyed. Fragments of metal flew in every direction. The guards dove for cover, their advance halted. In the confusion, Sarah moved. She ran along the ridge top, putting distance between herself and the guards, finding new cover. Good shot, Thomas said. Reloading. Doc's breathing was labored. 15 seconds. Thomas reached the compound. The guards who had stayed behind were focused on the ridge, on Sarah, on trying to figure out what had just happened. Thomas had no weapon. The guards had confiscated his hidden pistol during the search. He was unarmed, exhausted, facing 4 men with rifles. But he had surprise. Thomas picked up a length of metal pipe lying near the destroyed generator. It was about 3 feet long, heavy, solid. He swung it like a bat. The first guard went down with a crushed skull. The second turned toward the sound and took the pipe across his throat. He fell, gasping, drowning in his own blood. The third and fourth guards scattered, returning fire. Bullets snapped past Thomas's head. He dove behind a vehicle, his makeshift weapon clattering to the ground. Stalemate. Thomas had no gun. The guards had rifles but were cautious now, having seen what he could do up close. Movement on the ridge. The 4 guards who had been advancing on Sarah were regrouping. They had lost their radio coordination, but they still had numbers, still had the high ground. Sarah was running out of options. Doc, Thomas said into the radio, I need you to drop those 4 guards on the ridge. Tommy, that's 4 targets at 2,800 meters in shifting wind. I'm good, but I'm not that good. You're better than you think. Number. I'm dying, I'm old, and I'm about to miss a shot that will get your daughter killed. Doc's voice was raw, honest. Then miss close. Make them think twice about advancing. Buy her time. The Barrett fired again. The shot struck rock 10 feet from the nearest guard. Close enough. The 4 men threw themselves flat, scrambling for cover. Sarah used the distraction. She ran, not toward safety, toward Thomas. She was crossing open ground, exposed, visible. Suicide. Thomas stood from cover and laid down, suppressing fire with the rifle he had taken from the dead guard. The weapon kicked in his hands. 14 rounds, 12, 10. Forcing the remaining guards to keep their heads down, giving Sarah the seconds she needed. She reached the compound, dove behind cover beside Thomas. She was breathing hard, bleeding from a cut on her forehead, but alive. "Hi, Dad." Thomas reloaded the AK with a magazine he had pulled from the dead guard's vest. His last magazine. 30 rounds between him and death. "Hi, baby girl. Got a plan?" "Working on it." They were pinned into the compound. 4 guards on the ridge with rifles. 2 guards behind cover in the compound, also armed. No vehicle that worked. No escape route that did not involve crossing 100 meters of open ground. Doc could keep the ridge guards suppressed, but he could not shoot them all. Not at this distance. Not in this wind. They needed a miracle. Thomas looked around the compound. The buildings, the solar panels, the destroyed generator, the vehicles. The vehicles. One of them was a truck, old, battered, but it had keys in the ignition. He could see them from here, dangling from the steering column. If they could reach it, if it started, if they could survive the 50 meters of open ground between their current position and the driver's door. Too many ifs. Sarah was looking at the same truck, thinking the same thoughts. "On 3, she said. "On 3. Thomas took a breath. His last good breath, probably. Whatever happened in the next 30 seconds would determine whether he lived to take another. 1. He checked the rifle. 30 rounds. 2. Sarah gripped Hartley's rifle. Maybe 10 rounds left in the magazine. 3. They ran. The world exploded into noise and violence. Bullets snapped past, kicked up dust, punched through metal. Thomas fired blind, shooting at anything that moved, not aiming, just trying to create enough chaos to survive. Sarah reached the truck first. She yanked open the driver's door, slid behind the wheel, turned the key. The engine coughed, died. Thomas reached the passenger door, threw himself inside. Bullets shattered the rear window, punctured the door panel. "Try again," he said. Sarah turned the key. The engine coughed, turned over, caught. She threw the truck into gear and stomped the accelerator. The vehicle lurched forward, tires spinning, fighting for traction in the loose sand. Bullets punched through the tailgate, through the roof. Thomas twisted in his seat and fired back through the shattered rear window. 5 shots. 4, 3. The truck hit the compound perimeter at 30 miles per hour, crashed through a section of chain-link fence, kept going. Behind them, the guards were running for their vehicles, starting engines, beginning pursuit. Sarah drove like a demon. The truck bounced over rocks, slammed through ruts. The suspension screamed. The engine howled. "Where are we going?" she shouted over the noise. "The ridge, where Doc is set up. We'll never make it. They're faster." She was right. Through the side mirror, Thomas could see 2 vehicles behind them. Gaining, they were newer, faster, better maintained. The truck Thomas and Sarah were in was held together by rust and prayer. "Doc," Thomas said into the radio, "we're coming to you. Hot pursuit, 2 vehicles, maybe 8 hostiles." "Understood." Doc's voice was calm. "I've got eyes on you. Just get close." "How close?" "Close enough that I can't miss." The truck screamed across the desert. Sarah drove with both hands locked on the wheel, her face set in concentration. She was good, better than Thomas had known. She handled the vehicle like she had been doing this her whole life. Behind them, the pursuing vehicles were 50 meters back. Rifles appeared from windows, muzzle flashes. Bullets punched through the truck's thin metal skin, shattered the side mirror, blew out the passenger side tire. The truck lurched violently. Sarah fought the wheel, kept it moving, but their speed dropped. 40 miles per hour, 30, 25. The pursuing vehicles close to 30 meters. 20 meters. "Get down," Sarah said. She cranked the wheel hard left. The truck tilted. For a moment, Thomas thought it would roll. Then it slammed back down on all 4 wheels, now facing perpendicular to their pursuers. Sarah grabbed Hartley's rifle and opened fire through the driver's window. 3 shots. Fast. Controlled. The lead pursuing vehicle's windshield exploded. It swerved, rolled, came apart in a cloud of dust and metal. The second vehicle braked hard, stopped. Men piled out, taking cover, returning fire. Sarah threw the truck back into gear. They lurched forward, the blown tire flapping, the rim digging into sand. "We're not going to make it," she said. Thomas looked at the ridge ahead. 500 meters. It might as well have been 500 miles. "Keep driving." "Dad, the truck is dying." She was right. The engine was making a sound no engine should make. Grinding, clattering, pieces of internal machinery deciding they had had enough. The truck managed another 200 meters before it gave up entirely. The engine seized with a sound like a gunshot. The vehicle coasted to a stop. Out, Thomas said. They bailed from the truck and ran. The terrain was uphill now, climbing toward the ridge where Doc was positioned. Behind them, the guards were advancing on foot, maybe 6 of them, maybe 8. Hard to tell through the dust and heat shimmer. Sarah was faster than Thomas, younger, stronger. She pulled ahead, reached the base of the ridge, started climbing. Thomas's legs gave out halfway up. He collapsed, could not get up. His body had nothing left. Sarah came back for him, grabbed his arm, pulled. "Leave me," he said. "Not a chance. I'm slowing you down. Then we die slow together. Come on." She hauled him upright. Together they climbed, meters, feet, inches, every step purchased with agony. Bullets struck around them, close, too close. Then Doc's rifle spoke again. The Barrett's report echoed across the desert. One of the pursuing guards dropped, dead before he hit the ground. The others scattered, dove for cover. Their advance halted. Doc fired again. Yin missed, but close enough to make them think. Sarah and Thomas reached the top of the ridge. Doc was there, prone behind the Barrett, working the bolt, chambering another round. He looked worse than Thomas had ever seen him. Skin gray, breathing shallow, blood on his lips. "About time," Doc said. "I was getting lonely." "How many rounds left?" "3, plus whatever you have in that rifle." Thomas checked the AK, empty. He had fired his last round during the escape. "So we've got 3 rounds total against however many of them are still alive." Doc grinned. It was a terrible grin. Bloody, defiant. "I've faced worse odds." "When?" "Never." But it sounded good. Below them, the guards were regrouping. They had cover now. Were coordinating their approach. They would flank, would overwhelm through superior numbers. It was over. Thomas knew it. Sarah knew it. Doc knew it. But they did not surrender. Doc fired his last 3 rounds, spacing them out, making each one count, forcing the guards to move carefully, buying time measured in seconds. Thomas picked up rocks, threw them, useless, defiant. Sarah had no ammunition left at all. She picked up rocks too, threw them alongside her father. The guards advanced. They were 10 meters away when the helicopters appeared. 2 of them, black, unmarked. They came in low and fast from the north, rotors beating the air, machine guns already firing. The guards scattered, broke, ran. The helicopters did not pursue. They landed on the ridgetop, downwash, throwing up clouds of dust. Armed men poured out. American, military bearing. They set up a perimeter, secured the area, moved with the efficiency of professionals. Agent Chen climbed out of the lead helicopter. He looked at Thomas, at Sarah, at Doc bleeding on the ground. "Mr. Caldwell, you look terrible." Thomas could not speak, could barely breathe. Sarah found her voice. "Thank you." Chen knelt beside Doc. "Medic," he shouted. A combat medic ran over. Started working. IV pressure bandages, oxygen. "He's lost a lot of blood," the medic said. "We need to get him to a hospital now." They loaded Doc onto a stretcher, loaded him into the helicopter. Sarah and Thomas climbed in after him. The helicopter lifted. The desert fell away below. The compound, the ridge, the place where they had almost died. Thomas held Doc's hand. Doc's eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow. "Stay with me, brother." Doc's eyes opened, focused on Thomas's face. "Did we win?" Thomas looked at Sarah. Alive. Safe. Looking back at him was something that might have been forgiveness. "Yeah, we won." Doc smiled. Then he closed his eyes. The helicopter raced north toward the border, toward hospitals, toward life. Below, the Mexican desert burned under an indifferent sun. The helicopter touched down at University Medical Center in El Paso 18 minutes after lifting off from the Mexican desert. 18 minutes during which Robert Martinez died twice and was brought back both times by a combat medic who refused to accept failure. Thomas watched it happen from 3 feet away. Watched Doc's eyes roll back. Watched the medic slam defibrillator paddles against his friend's chest. Watched the body convulse. Watched life return in a gasp and a flutter of eyelids. "Clear!" the medic shouted over the rotor noise. "We've got him! We've got him!" But the medic's eyes told a different story. The eyes said this man was dying. The eyes said 18 minutes might be 17 minutes too late. The moment the skids touched concrete, the helicopter doors flew open. A trauma team was waiting. Doctors, nurses, a gurney. They moved with choreographed precision, transferring Doc from the helicopter to the gurney, maintaining the IV lines, keeping pressure on the wounds, moving fast toward the emergency entrance. Sarah tried to follow. A nurse stopped her. "Ma'am, you need to wait here. We'll take care of him. That's my father's best friend." "I understand, but we need space to work. Please." The door swung shut. Doc disappeared into the building. Thomas stood on the helipad, swaying slightly, his body finally registering the abuse of the last 36 hours. No sleep, no food, dehydration, wounds he had not noticed acquiring, a cut on his forehead, burns on his hands from hot brass casings, bruises everywhere. Agent Chen appeared beside him. "Mr. Caldwell, we need to get you checked out. You're bleeding." Thomas looked down. His shirt was soaked with blood. He could not remember being shot, could not remember when it had happened. "It doesn't matter." "It does." Chen gestured to another medic. "This man needs attention. I'm not leaving until I know about Doc. You can wait inside, in a bed, while they treat you." Thomas wanted to argue, wanted to plant his feet and refuse. But his legs had other ideas. They buckled. He would have fallen if Chen had not caught him. The emergency room was chaos. Organized chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Doctors moving between beds, nurses calling out vitals, monitors beeping, the smell of antiseptic and blood and fear. They put Thomas in a bed separated from the main floor by a thin curtain. A doctor appeared, young, maybe 30. She looked at Thomas with the kind of professional concern that came from seeing too many broken bodies. "I'm Dr. Patel. Can you tell me what hurts?" "Everything." She smiled. It was a tired smile. "Let's be more specific." They cut off his shirt, examined the wounds. The cut on his forehead required 6 stitches. The burns on his hands were 2nd degree, painful but not serious. The blood on his shirt turned out to be mostly not his, mostly Doc's. But there was a bullet graze across his left ribs. Thomas had not felt it happen, had not noticed it among all the other pain. The doctor cleaned it, bandaged it, gave him a shot of antibiotics. "You're lucky," she said. 2 inches to the right and we'd be operating." "I don't feel lucky." "You're alive. That's lucky enough." Dr. Patel left. Thomas sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the curtain, listening to the sounds of the emergency room. Somewhere behind him, Sarah was being treated. He could hear her voice, steady, calm, answering questions about her injuries. She sounded like her mother. Mary had been calm in crisis too. When Thomas had come home from deployments with nightmares and shaking hands, Mary had been the steady one. The rock. The person who held everything together while he fell apart. He had never thanked her for that, had never told her how much it meant, had just taken and taken and taken until there was nothing left to take. The curtain opened. Agent Chen stood there holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this." Thomas took the coffee. It was terrible, weak and bitter, and exactly what he needed. Chen pulled up a chair. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Chen said, "We found Hartley." Thomas looked up. "Dead?" Chen shook his head. "Alive. Unconscious. Your daughter hit him pretty hard with that rock, skull fracture. He's in surgery now." "He going to make it?" "Doctors think so. For whatever time he has left, the cancer will kill him in a few months regardless." Thomas sipped the coffee. "Good." Chen studied him. "You know I could charge you with about 40 federal crimes. Illegal border crossing, engaging in armed conflict on foreign soil, discharging firearms in a populated area, reckless endangerment. But you won't. Number 1, I won't." Chen leaned back in the chair. "What you did was stupid, reckless. It violated about a dozen international treaties and nearly caused a diplomatic incident with Mexico. But you saved your daughter, and you exposed a cartel operation that we've been tracking for 6 months. So instead of charging you, I'm going to file this under unauthorized civilian action taken under duress." Thomas almost smiled. "That's a hell of a euphemism." "I'm good at euphemisms. It's part of the job." They sat in silence for another moment. "How's Martinez?" Chen asked. Thomas shook his head. "I don't know. They took him straight to surgery. I haven't heard anything. He's a tough old bastard. If anyone can pull through, it's him. He's got cancer. Stage 3, lung cancer. He came on this mission knowing it was probably a death sentence." Chen was quiet. "Then why?" "Because he's my brother. Because 40 years ago, I saved his life, and he's been trying to pay me back ever since. Because that's what we do. We show up for each other, even when it kills us, especially then." The curtain opened again. Sarah stood there. She had been cleaned up. The cut on her forehead was bandaged. She wore hospital scrubs instead of her torn, bloody Border Patrol uniform. But her eyes were the same. Hard. Determined. looking at Thomas with an expression he could not quite read. They said I could take you home, if you're ready. Where's home? Your ranch, I guess. Unless you have somewhere else you want to go. Thomas stood. His body protested but obeyed. No, the ranch is fine. Chen stood as well. I'll need statements from both of you. Tomorrow, if you're up to it. And Mr. Caldwell, don't leave the state. We're still sorting out the legal implications of all this. I'm not going anywhere. Chen left. Thomas and Sarah stood looking at each other across the small space of the hospital room. Finally, Sarah said, "Thank you." For what? For coming, for trying, for not giving up. I failed. I couldn't make the shot. You showed up. That's more than you did for Mom. The words hung in the air between them, sharp, true, cutting deeper than any bullet. Thomas nodded. You're right. I wasn't there for her. Wasn't there for you. I was a coward. Sarah's expression softened slightly. You were there today, when it mattered, when I needed you. One time doesn't make up for a lifetime. No, but it's a start. They left the hospital together. The sun was setting. The sky had turned orange and purple, the desert painted in long shadows. Sarah's truck was in the parking lot, a border patrol vehicle. Official. She helped Thomas into the passenger seat. The drive to the ranch took 2 hours. They did not talk much. Sarah drove in silence, her hands steady on the wheel, her eyes on the road. Thomas watched the landscape roll past, the same desert he had driven through yesterday. Was it only yesterday? It felt like years. At the ranch, Sarah helped him inside. The house was exactly as he had left it, dusty, neglected, the coffee cup still on the porch railing, the suicide note still in pieces in the trash. I'll make up the guest room, Sarah said. You don't have to stay. I know, but I'm going to anyway. She disappeared down the hall. Thomas heard her moving around, opening closets, finding sheets, making a bed in a room that had not been used in 5 years. He walked to his own bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, looked at the nightstand drawer. The revolver was still there, still loaded, but something had changed. Thomas pulled out the gun, looked at it for a long moment, the weight of it, the promise of it, the easy way out that had tempted him every morning for 2 years. He unloaded it, dropped the bullets into his palm, put them in a drawer, put the gun in a different drawer. He would not be needing it anymore. Sarah appeared in the doorway. Guest room is ready. I found clean sheets in the hallway closet. Thank you. There's no food in the kitchen. I can make a run to the store if you want. I'm not hungry. You should eat something. Sarah. She stopped. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay. Do you think you can ever forgive me? For Mary, for not being there, for all of it. Sarah was quiet for a long time. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, looking at her father with eyes that had seen too much in the last 2 days. I don't know, she said finally. I want to. I think maybe I'm starting to. But forgiveness isn't a switch I can flip. It's going to take time. I understand. But Dad, here's what I do know. You came for me. You risked everything. You almost died. That means something. It doesn't erase the past, but it means something. Thomas felt something in his chest, a loosening, a weight he had been carrying for so long he had forgotten what it felt like to be without it. I love you, baby girl. I love you too. Sarah left. Thomas heard her moving around in the guest room, heard the bed creak as she lay down, heard nothing after that. He stood and walked to the bathroom, looked at himself in the mirror for the first time in 2 years. An old man looked back, 62 years old, gray hair, lined face, scars from a lifetime of violence. But the eyes were different. The eyes were not quite as dead as they had been yesterday. He had shown up. Finally, after 5 years of absence, he had shown up. It was a start. Thomas showered. The hot water stung his wounds, but he did not care. He stood under the spray until it ran cold, washing away blood and dust and the smell of gunpowder. When he emerged, wrapped in a towel, his phone was ringing. He picked it up without looking at the caller ID. Hello, Tommy, it's Rosa, Doc's wife. Her voice was tight, controlled. The voice of a woman who had received bad news and was trying not to break. Rosa, how is he? He's alive. Barely. She took a breath. The doctor said the next 24 hours are critical. He lost a lot of blood. His lungs are damaged from the cancer and now from the gunshot. They have him on a ventilator. Can I see him? Not tonight. Family only. But Tommy, he asked for you. When he woke up for a few minutes, he said to tell you it was worth it. Thomas sat down on the edge of the bed. Worth it. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I never meant for this to happen. He knows. Rosa's voice broke slightly. He knows, Tommy. He went because he wanted to, because you're his brother. Don't you dare feel guilty about that. I can't help it. Then feel it. Feel all of it. But don't let it destroy you. Robert wouldn't want that. I'll come tomorrow. First thing. Okay, Rosa paused. Tommy, thank you for bringing him back alive, for giving me a chance to say goodbye if it comes to that. Don't say that. He's gonna pull through. Maybe, maybe not. But either way, thank you. The call ended. Thomas sat holding the phone, staring at nothing. Doc was dying. Might already be dead by morning, and it was Thomas's fault. If he had not called, if he had not asked for help, if he had just accepted that Sarah was lost and drunk himself to death in this bedroom, Doc would be home right now, with Rosa, with his grandchildren, alive. Instead, he was on a ventilator, fighting for every breath, his body destroyed by a mission that should never have happened. Thomas stood, walked to the kitchen, opened the cabinet where he kept the whiskey. The bottle was half empty, had been half empty for 6 months. He poured 3 fingers into a glass, stared at it. Drinking would not bring Doc back, would not change what had happened, would not make the guilt go away, but it would make the next few hours bearable. He raised the glass to his lips. Dad? Sarah stood in the kitchen doorway wearing an old t-shirt of his as a nightgown. She looked young, vulnerable, like she had when she was 8 years old and had nightmares about monsters under the bed. You okay? Thomas lowered the glass, set it on the counter. No. She walked over, looked at the whiskey, looked at him. Doc? He's alive. Barely. Rosa says the next 24 hours are critical. He's tough. He'll make it. Maybe. Sarah picked up the glass, looked at it, then she poured it down the sink. Not tonight, Dad. Tonight you stay sober. Tonight we both stay sober and we deal with this together. I don't know how to deal with this. Neither do I, but we'll figure it out. She took his hand, led him to the living room. They sat on the couch that Mary had picked out 15 years ago. The couch where they had watched movies as a family, where Sarah had done homework while Thomas pretended to watch TV and actually watched her, amazed that he had helped create something so perfect. Tell me about Mom, Sarah said, about the good times before everything fell apart. So Thomas told her. He told her about meeting Mary at a county fair in 1982, about their first date at a barbecue restaurant that had burned down 10 years ago, about the wedding in a small church with 20 people in attendance, about Sarah's birth, the terror and joy of holding this tiny, fragile life and knowing he was responsible for keeping her safe, about the years when they had been happy, when Thomas had been stationed at Fort Hood and came home every night, when they had eaten dinner as a family, when Sarah had been too young to understand that her father was broken inside. Sarah listened, asked questions, laughed at the good memories, cried at the sad ones. They talked until 2 in the morning, until exhaustion finally overtook them both. Sarah fell asleep on the couch, her head on Thomas's shoulder. He did not move, did not want to wake her, just sat there in the darkness of his living room, his daughter breathing softly beside him, and felt something he had not felt in 5 years. Peace! The sun woke him, streaming through the living room window, harsh and bright. Thomas's neck screamed in protest. He had slept sitting up, his head tilted at an angle that his 62-year-old spine did not appreciate. Sarah was gone. He could hear her in the kitchen. The smell of coffee drifted through the house. He stood, stretched, walked to the kitchen. Sarah had found eggs and bread, was making breakfast, French toast, Mary's recipe. She had not made it since Mary died. Sit, she said. It'll be ready in 5 minutes. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. Thomas sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he had eaten breakfast for 30 years, where he had read Sarah bedtime stories, where Mary had told him about the cancer, her voice steady, her hands shaking. Sarah brought over a plate, French toast, bacon, orange juice, real food, the kind of meal Thomas had not eaten in months. Eat. He ate. The food tasted better than it had any right to. Or maybe he was just hungry enough that anything would taste good. Sarah sat across from him with her own plate. For a while they ate in silence. Then Sarah said, I called the hospital. Doc made it through the night. He's stable. Still on the ventilator, but stable. Thomas felt something unclench in his chest, thank God. Rosa said we can visit this afternoon, after they move him out of ICU. I'll drive. Sarah nodded, finished her breakfast, took both plates to the sink. Thomas watched her move around his kitchen, her mother's kitchen, moving with the same efficiency, the same unconscious grace. You look like her, he said. Sarah turned. I know. Everyone says that. She would be proud of you. What you did yesterday, how brave you were. She'd be proud of you too, for finally showing up. Better late than never. Sarah smiled. It was a small smile, sad but real. Better late than never. They drove to El Paso in Sarah's truck. The conversation was easier now. Not comfortable exactly, but easier. They talked about small things. Sarah's job, her apartment in Presidio, her plans for the future. She did not ask about Thomas's plans, probably because she knew he did not have any. At the hospital, Rosa met them in the waiting room. She looked like she had not slept. Her eyes were red. Her hands twisted a tissue into shreds. She hugged Thomas, held on longer than was necessary. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for bringing him back." "How is he?" "Awake. The ventilator is out. He can breathe on his own. The doctors are cautiously optimistic." "Can I see him?" Rosa nodded. 5 minutes. That's all they'll allow. Doc's room was on this 4th floor. Intensive care. The walls were glass. Machines surrounded the bed. Monitors beeped. IVs dripped. Doc lay in the center of it all. Small, fragile, connected to more tubes and wires than seemed possible. But his eyes were open. "Tommy," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. Thomas pulled a chair close to the bed, sat down, took Doc's hand. "I'm sorry." "Don't." Doc's grip was weak but present. "Don't apologize. I knew what I was signing up for. You could be home, with Rosa, with your family." "I was with family." Doc smiled. It hurt to watch. "Your family, Tommy. You always have been. And Sarah, I'm glad I got to help save her." "You did. You kept those guards pinned down. Gave us time to escape. You saved our lives. Then it was worth it." Doc's eyes closed, opened again with effort. "Listen to me. I don't have much time. The cancer. It's worse than I told you." "I know." "No, you don't." Doc's breathing was labored. 3 months, maybe less. With or without this gunshot wound, I was dying. At least this way I got to go out doing something that mattered. You mattered at home too. I know. But Tommy, there's dying in bed, and there's dying on your feet. I chose my feet, no regrets. Thomas felt tears on his face, did not bother to wipe them away. "I'm gonna miss you, brother." "Not yet." Doc squeezed his hand. "I'm still here. Still fighting, but when the time comes, you remember something for me." "What?" "Firebase Rachel. We saved 28 men that day. Yesterday we saved 1. Your daughter. That's enough. That's a life well lived." A nurse appeared at the door. "I'm sorry, but you need to let him rest." Thomas stood. "One more thing, Doc." "Yeah?" "Thank you. For everything. For Grenada. For yesterday. For being the best friend I ever had." Doc smiled. It was the last thing Thomas saw before the nurse ushered him out of the room. In the hallway, Sarah was waiting. She had been crying too. "He's going to be okay," she said. "He has to be." Thomas wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe that Doc would beat the cancer, would walk out of this hospital, would go home to Rosa and have years left. But he knew better. They left the hospital, drove back to the ranch in silence. The sun was setting again. Another day ending, another day survived. At the ranch, Sarah said, "I need to get back to work. File reports. Deal with the aftermath of all this. When will I see you again?" "I don't know. Soon." Sarah paused. "Dad, I'm not saying everything is fixed. We still have a lot to work through, but I'm not disappearing again, I promise." "Okay." She hugged him. It was brief, awkward, but it was real. Then she drove away, taillights disappearing down the long dirt road. Thomas stood on his porch and watched her go. The ranch was quiet, empty, but it did not feel like a tomb anymore. It felt like a place where someone lived, someone who had survived, someone who maybe, just maybe, had earned the right to keep living. Thomas went inside, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table. His phone buzzed, a text from Rosa. "Doc, sleeping peacefully. Doctors say he's stable, 1 day at a time." Thomas replied, "1 day at a time." He looked around his kitchen, at the mess, the dust, the accumulated neglect of 5 years. Tomorrow, he would start cleaning, would start fixing what was broken, would start living instead of just existing. But tonight, he would sit in his kitchen and remember. Remember Firebase Rachel. Remember yesterday in Mexico. Remember every moment that had led him to this place. And he would be grateful. Grateful that he had shown up. Grateful that he had survived. Grateful that there was still time to be the man his daughter deserved. Outside, the West Texas stars appeared, bright and cold and infinite. The same stars that had watched him fail. The same stars that had watched him try, the same stars that would watch him start again. Thomas Caldwell sat in his kitchen and watched the night come. And for the first time in 5 years, he was not afraid of it. 3 weeks passed. Thomas Caldwell learned what it meant to wait, to exist in the space between crisis and resolution, where every phone call might bring news of death, where every morning began with the question of whether today would be the day. Robert Martinez remained in the hospital. Stable, the doctor said. But stable was a relative term when cancer was eating you from the inside and a gunshot wound had destroyed half your lung capacity. Stable meant not dead yet. Stable meant borrowed time. Thomas visited every day, drove the 2 hours from his ranch to El Paso, sat in the uncomfortable chair beside Doc's bed, and talked about nothing important. The weather, the horses, the fence post that still needed fixing. They did not talk about Firebase Rachel, did not talk about Mexico, did not talk about the fact that Doc was dying and they both knew it. Sometimes Rosa was there, sometimes Sarah. Sometimes Thomas sat alone while Doc slept, listening to the machines breathe for his friend, watching the monitors track a heartbeat that grew a little weaker each day. On the 21st day, Doc woke up more alert than he had been in a week. His eyes were clear. His voice was stronger. "Tommy, I need to tell you something." Thomas leaned forward. "What?" "I'm going home tomorrow." "That's good. The doctors cleared you." Number Doc smiled. It was a ghost of his old smile, defiant, stubborn. "I'm checking myself out against medical advice. Rosa knows. She's not happy, but she understands." "Doc, you're not ready. You still need the oxygen, the medications, the monitoring." "I'm dying, Tommy. Here or at home, the result is the same. But at home, I can die in my own bed, can see my grandkids, can have one last barbecue in my backyard." Doc paused to catch his breath. The cancer had taken that from him too. The simple act of speaking without gasping. "I don't want to die in a hospital. Don't want my last memories to be fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic. I want to go home." Thomas understood, would have made the same choice. "Okay, what do you need me to do?" "Be there." Doc reached out. Thomas took his hand. "When it happens, be there. Don't let me die alone. I promise. And Tommy, after I'm gone, take care of Rosa. Make sure she's okay. She's going to pretend she's fine, but she's not. She's going to need a friend." "I will." Doc closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there were tears. "I'm scared, brother." Thomas squeezed his hand. "I know. Not of dying. I made my peace with that a long time ago. But I'm scared of leaving Rosa. Scared of missing my grandkids growing up. Scared that I didn't say everything I needed to say." "You said it. You said it every day you were married to her. Every day you were a good father, a good grandfather, a good friend. You said it with your life, Doc. That's louder than words." Doc smiled again. "When did you get wise?" "About 3 weeks ago, in a Mexican desert, when I almost lost everything." They sat in silence for a while. Outside the window, El Paso sprawled under a cloudless sky. The sun moved across the glass towers downtown, painting them in shades of gold. Finally, Doc said, "No regrets, Tommy, about Mexico, about any of it. I got to go out like a warrior. Got to save your daughter. Got to be the man I was before the cancer. That's worth dying for." "You're not dead yet. Not yet. But soon, we both know it." Thomas knew. Could see it in the gray pallor of Doc's skin. Could hear it in the rattle of his breathing. Could feel it in the weakness of his grip. His best friend was dying. And there was nothing Thomas could do except be there. Could do except keep his promise. Doc went home the next day. Against the protests of his doctors, against the warnings about infection and complications, and the very real possibility that leaving the hospital meant dying within days instead of weeks. Rosa signed the papers, took her husband home, set up the guest bedroom as a hospice room, oxygen tanks, hospital bed, all the equipment needed to make a dying man comfortable. Thomas helped carry Doc inside. His friend weighed nothing. Cancer and bullet wounds had stripped away muscle and fat until only bone and will remained. They settled him in bed. Rosa fussed with the pillows, adjusted the oxygen, held Doc's hand and tried not to cry. The grandchildren came to visit, 2 girls, ages 8 and 10. They were scared at first, frightened by the oxygen mask and the IV and their grandfather's skeletal appearance. But Doc smiled at them, told them jokes, asked about school, and slowly they relaxed, climbed onto the bed beside him, showed him drawings they had made. Thomas watched from the doorway. Watch this man who had saved his life, who had risked everything in Mexico, who was now dying by inches, give his granddaughters one last gift. The gift of normalcy, of pretending everything was fine, of not burdening them with the reality of death. Sarah came the next day. She sat with Doc for an hour, talking quietly. Thomas did not intrude, did not ask what they discussed. Some conversations were private. When she emerged, her eyes were red. He told me about Firebase Rachel, she said, about what you did, about the 28 men you saved. He exaggerates. I just made a radio call. He said you called artillery on your own position. Danger close. That you stood your ground when everyone else ran. Someone had to. Sarah looked at him. Really looked at him. Not with anger or resentment or disappointment, but with something that might have been respect. I never knew that about you. Never knew you were a hero. I'm not a hero, I just did my job. That's what heroes say. She left, drove back to Presidio and her own life. But she called that night, and the night after. Small conversations, progress. On the fourth day home, Doc asked to sit outside. Rosa and Thomas helped him into a wheelchair. Rolled him onto the back patio. The sun was setting. The sky was on fire with orange and red and purple. Doc sat wrapped in blankets despite the warmth. Stared at the sunset like he was memorizing it. Beautiful, he whispered. Thomas sat beside him. Yeah, it is. You know what I regret most? What? Not doing this more. Sitting outside, watching the sky. I spent so much time working, building the business, providing for the family. All good things, but I should have stopped more. Should have watched more sunsets. Thomas thought about his own ranch, about the sunsets he had ignored because he was too drunk or too depressed to notice, about the beauty he had let slip past while he waited to die. I know what you mean. They sat until the sun disappeared below the horizon, until the sky darkened and stars appeared, until Doc's breathing became labored and Rosa insisted they go back inside. That night, Doc's condition worsened. The oxygen was not enough. His breathing became rapid, shallow. Rosa called hospice. They sent a nurse. The nurse explained what was happening. The body shutting down, systems failing one by one, hours maybe, not days. Rosa called the family. Her children came. The grandchildren stayed home. Too young to see this. Too young to carry this memory. Thomas stayed, kept his promise, sat in a chair beside the bed while Doc's family gathered around. Doc drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he was lucid. Sometimes he spoke to people who were not there. His mother, dead 30 years. Friends from Grenada. Ghosts. Near midnight, he woke, looked at Thomas. His eyes were clear. Tommy, I'm here. Tell me about the ghost. What? Grenada. Why they called you Ghost. I never heard the whole story. Thomas had not thought about that in decades. Had tried to forget. But Doc deserved the truth. There was an enemy sniper, Thomas said. He had killed 6 of our guys in 2 weeks. Nobody could find him. He would shoot and disappear. Like a ghost. Doc listened, breathing hard but listening. Command wanted him dead, put a bounty on him. $500, a fortune back then. Everyone was hunting him. Did you find him? Thomas nodded. I found him, took me 3 days. But I found his hide, a spider hole in the jungle, camouflaged perfectly. He was good, better than anyone I had faced. You killed him? Thomas was quiet for a long moment. No, I watched him for 6 hours. Had him in my sights a dozen times. Perfect shots, but I didn't take them. Why not? Because he was just a kid, 17, maybe 18, scared, alone, doing his job the same as me. And I realized that killing him would not end the war, would not bring back the men he had killed, would just add one more body to a pile that was already too high. So you let him go. So I let him go. Thomas smiled at the memory. But I did take his rifle, snuck into his hide while he was sleeping, took the rifle and left a note. It said, I could have killed you. Next time I will. Go home. Doc's laugh was a wheeze. You're crazy. Maybe, but it worked. The sniper disappeared, never killed another American. Maybe he went home. Maybe he realized he was fighting the wrong war. I don't know, but I like to think he lived. And they called you Ghost because I disappeared after that. Refused to take credit. Refused the bounty. Command did not know what to make of me. A sniper who would not take a shot, who walked away from $500. They started calling me Ghost, the sniper who did not exist. Doc's breathing was getting worse, slower, shallower, but he was smiling. That's a good story. It's a true story. Even better. Doc closed his eyes. I'm glad I know it. Glad I know who you really are. Who am I? A good man. Better than you think. Doc's voice was fading. Don't forget that, Tommy. Don't go back to that ranch and forget. I won't. Promise me. I promise. Doc's hand went limp in Thomas's grip. His breathing stopped. The monitors went silent. Rosa let out a sob. Her children moved to comfort her. Thomas sat holding his friend's hand. The hand that had pulled him from danger at Firebase Rachel. The hand that had steadied the spotting scope in Mexico. The hand that had held his own through 40 years of brotherhood. The hand that was now still and cooling. Robert Martinez was gone. Thomas stood, stepped back, let the family have their moment, their grief. He walked outside. The night air was cool. Above, the stars were bright and cold and indifferent. Thomas looked up at them and said a prayer. Not to God. He was not sure he believed in God anymore. But to Doc, to the man who'd been more than a friend, who had been a brother. Rest easy, Doc. You earned it. The funeral was 3 days later. Military honors, 21-gun salute, a folded flag presented to Rosa with the gratitude of a grateful nation. The cemetery was crowded. Doc had been loved by his family, by his community, by the veterans who knew what he had done in Grenada and what he had done in Mexico. Sarah came, stood beside Thomas, did not speak, did not need to. When it was over, when the mourners had dispersed and the cemetery workers had lowered the casket into the ground, Thomas stood alone at the graveside. He thought about Firebase Rachel, about the 28 men who had lived because Doc had stayed, because Doc had helped call in that artillery strike, because Doc had refused to run. He thought about Mexico, about Sarah pinned down on that ridge, about Doc's rifle speaking across 2,800 meters, buying the seconds that saved her life. He thought about a life well lived, about a man who had faced death with courage and dignity and no regrets. And Thomas made a decision. He would not waste the time he had left, would not go back to that ranch and wait to die, would not dishonor Doc's sacrifice by giving up. He would live. For however many years or months or days remained, he would live. The ranch was different when Thomas returned. Or maybe Thomas was different. Maybe it was the same dusty, neglected house it had always been, but he was seeing it with new eyes. He started small, cleaned the kitchen, washed the dishes that had been piling up for weeks, swept the floors, opened the windows and let fresh air chase out the staleness. Then the living room, the bedroom, the bathroom. Room by room, he reclaimed his home from the depression that had turned it into a tomb. He fixed the fence post that had been broken for months, repaired the barn door, gave the horses the attention they deserved. Physical work, simple work, the kind of work that tired the body and quieted the mind. Sarah came to visit 2 weeks after the funeral. She pulled up in her truck and just stared at the ranch. You cleaned. I cleaned. It looks good. She walked inside, looked around. It looks like someone lives here. Someone does. They had dinner that night. Thomas cooked. Steaks on the grill. Baked potatoes. Simple food. The kind of meal he had not made since Mary died. They ate on the porch, watched the sunset, talked about small things, Sarah's work, the ranch, the weather. Then Sarah said, I've been thinking about what Doc said to me at the hospital. What did he say? That you saved his life at Firebase Rachel. That you were the bravest man he ever knew. She paused. And that I should give you a chance. That people can change if you let them. Thomas set down his fork. Do you believe that? I'm starting to. Sarah looked at him, really looked at him. You're different, Dad. Since Mexico. Since Doc died. You're present, actually here. I had forgotten what that felt like. I forgot too, but I remember now. Good. Because I need you to stay present, to stay here. I can't lose you too. You won't. Promise. Thomas thought about the revolver in the nightstand, about the suicide note he had torn to pieces, about the mornings when death had seemed like the only escape from pain. I promise. They sat on the porch until the stars came out, until Sarah had to leave. She hugged him goodbye. A real hug. Not perfunctory, not obligatory. Real. After she left, Thomas sat alone. But alone felt different now. Not lonely, just solitary. A man in his space, at peace. The phone rang. Agent Chen. Mr. Caldwell, I wanted to update you on Jack Hartley. Thomas had not thought about Hartley in weeks. Had almost forgotten the man existed. What about him? He died this morning. the cancer. He never regained consciousness after the surgery, died in a hospital bed without ever waking up. Thomas felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, no closure, just a vague sense that a chapter had ended. Thank you for letting me know. There's one more thing. Chen paused. The cartel operation we disrupted, the one you stumbled into, it was bigger than we thought. Hartley was training over 50 fighters, planning coordinated attacks on 3 border towns. If you had not gone in, if you had not exposed them, a lot of Americans would have died. I did not do it for America. I did it for Sarah. I know, but the result is the same. You saved lives, Mr. Caldwell, more than you know. After the call ended, Thomas sat thinking about that, about unintended consequences, about how trying to save one person had saved many, about how showing up mattered, even when the reasons were selfish, even when the outcome was uncertain. Showing up mattered. A month passed, then 2. Summer turned to fall. The temperature dropped from unbearable to merely hot. The grass on the ranch turned brown, waiting for winter rains that might or might not come. Thomas settled into a routine. Up at dawn, coffee on the porch, work on the ranch, lunch, more work, dinner, sleep. The rhythm of a normal life. Sarah visited every weekend. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence. The relationship was healing. Slowly, but healing. On a Saturday in October, Sarah brought someone with her. A man. Tall, maybe 35. He wore jeans and a work shirt and had the bearing of someone who was comfortable with himself. Dad, this is Michael, my boyfriend. Thomas shook the man's hand, sized him up in the way fathers do, looking for weakness, looking for reasons to disapprove. Found none. Nice to meet you, sir. You too. They had dinner together. Michael was a civil engineer, worked on bridge projects along the border. He was polite, respectful. He looked at Sarah the way Thomas had looked at Mary 30 years ago. After dinner, Michael and Sarah went for a walk, gave Thomas space, time to process. When they came back, Sarah pulled Thomas aside. What do you think? He seems good. He is good. I think I love him. Thomas smiled. Then I'm happy for you. Really? Really. You deserve to be happy, baby girl. Sarah hugged him. Thank you. That night, after they left, Thomas sat on his porch and thought about Mary, about how she would have loved to see this, Sarah happy, Sarah healing, Sarah building a life. I wish you could see her, he said to the empty air. She's going to be okay. We're both going to be okay. The stars offered no answer, but Thomas felt Mary's presence anyway, in the wind, in the quiet, in the peace that had finally settled over his ranch. On a Tuesday in November, Thomas was working on the north fence when a truck pulled up. An old truck, white, dusty. Rosa Martinez climbed out. Thomas had not seen her since the funeral, had called a few times, sent a card, but had given her space to grieve. Rosa, he walked over. What brings you out here? I needed to talk to you. She looked older, tired, but there was strength in her eyes. Can we sit? They sat on the porch. Thomas brought out coffee. They drank in silence for a moment. Then Rosa said, I'm selling the gun shop. Thomas had been afraid of that. The shop had been Doc's life, his legacy. I understand. No, you don't. Rosa set down her coffee. I'm not selling it because I can't run it. I'm selling it because I don't want to. Because every time I walk in there, I see Robert. I hear him, and it hurts too much. That makes sense, but I wanted to offer it to you first. If you want to buy it, keep it going. Honor what Robert built. Thomas had not expected that, did not know what to say. Rosa, I don't know anything about running a gun shop. Robert said you were the best shooter he ever knew, said you understood weapons better than anyone. That's enough. I'm 62 years old. I've got a ranch to run, a daughter to rebuild a relationship with. I don't know if I have the energy for a business. Rosa smiled. It was a sad smile. I know, and I'm not pressuring you, but think about it. Because Robert would have wanted you to have it, would have wanted his legacy to continue with someone who understood what it meant. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. Rosa left. Thomas sat on the porch and thought about the gun shop, about spending his days surrounded by rifles and ammunition and the tools of his trade, about teaching others, about passing on knowledge, about legacy. By the time the sun set, he had made his decision. 3 months later, Thomas Caldwell became the owner of Martinez Arms and Ammunition. He changed nothing, kept the name, kept the layout, kept Doc's workbench exactly as it had been. But he added something new, a class, basic marksmanship, for beginners, for people who wanted to learn to shoot safely and accurately. The first class had 8 students, mostly men, mostly older, veterans, some of them, looking for something to do with their time. Thomas taught them the fundamentals: stance, grip, breathing, sight alignment, the same lessons his grandfather had taught him 60 years ago. At the end of the first class, one of the students approached. He was 70, white-haired, walked with a limp. "I was at Firebase Rachel." Thomas looked at him, really looked at him. "Lieutenant Morrison, 2nd Platoon. You called in the artillery that day, saved my life." The man extended his hand. Thomas shook it. "I never got to say thank you." Morrison's voice was thick with emotion. "For 40 years I wanted to find you, to shake your hand, to tell you that everything I have, my wife, my kids, my grandkids, I have because you did not run that day." Thomas did not know what to say, so he just held the man's hand. "Thank you," Morrison said again. "Thank you." After the class ended, after everyone left, Thomas sat in the gun shop alone, surrounded by rifles, by the smell of oil and gunpowder, by memories. He thought about Firebase Rachel, about the 28 men he had saved, men who had gone home, who had lived lives, who had families, men like Morrison. And Thomas realized something. His life had mattered, not because of the men he had killed, not because of his skill with a rifle, but because of the men he had saved, because he had shown up, because he had done the right thing, because he had not run. That was legacy. That was what his grandfather had tried to teach him, what Doc had understood, what Thomas was only now learning. Legacy was not what you took. It was what you gave. Sarah came to visit the shop the next weekend, looked around, smiled. "Doc would be proud." "I hope so. I know so." Sarah put her arm around him. "You're honoring him, keeping his memory alive. That matters." "How are things with Michael?" "Good. Really good." She paused. "We're moving in together next month." "That's a big step." "I know, but it feels right. He feels right." "Then I'm happy for you." Sarah looked at her father. "You really are different, you know. Not just on the surface, deep down. You're the dad I remember from when I was little, before everything got hard." "I'm trying to be." "You're succeeding." After she left, Thomas locked up the shop, drove home to his ranch. The place did not feel empty anymore. It felt like home. He made dinner, ate on the porch, watched the sunset paint the West Texas sky in shades of fire. And Thomas Caldwell realized he was no longer waiting to die. He was living, actually living. For the first time in 5 years, he had a purpose, had a reason to wake up every morning, had something to give. He had his daughter, had the gun shop, had students to teach, had a legacy to build. It was enough, more than enough. That night, Thomas slept without nightmares, without pills, without whiskey. He slept the sleep of a man at peace. In the morning, he would wake up, would drive to the shop, would teach another class, would help another person learn, would honor Doc, would honor Mary, would honor his grandfather, would honor the ghost he had been and the man he was becoming. The stars wheeled overhead, the desert breathed, the horses slept in the barn. And Thomas Caldwell, at 62 years old, finally learned what it meant to be alive. Not just surviving, not just existing, but living, fully, completely, without regret. He had shown up. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The end.